Hello everyone. My name is Dave Casuto, instructor for Learn It. Welcome to our advanced Photoshop class. Perhaps you've already watched my intro to Photoshop class and are hungry for more Photoshop fun. Well, in this advanced class, we follow up on the last set of topics and get into a ton of more cool stuff. Well, what will you learn exactly? We start off by really taking ownership of Photoshop, learning how to customize our interface, shortcuts, and tools. We'll then get into some invaluable layer management techniques, followed up by layer comps, a few lessons on the power of blending modes, advanced selection techniques, an overview of working with vector shapes and paths, and of course, we then do a deep dive into a ton of other filter options available in Photoshop, and so much more. Now, this course is designed to be an interactive, hands-on course, so occasionally you'll hear me say things like, pause the video and practice on your own. So make sure you download the class files from the link below to do so. This will ensure you get the most out of the course and learn the program in a more experiential, hands-on manner. I'm looking forward to getting you a little closer to expert status and in showing you all the great tools Photoshop has to offer, so stay tuned and get ready to learn. If you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe. If you want to earn certificates and digital badges, please become a member of our Patreon. The link is in our video description. If you have any questions you want answered by one of our instructors, please join our off-site community. The link is in the description as well. And as I mentioned, this course does have exercise files, and you'll find them in the video description below. Let's begin with how we can customize and essentially take some more ownership over Photoshop. Now that we're in this advanced level, we're going to have a little bit more flexibility and choices in terms of what we want to do with Photoshop. So currently I'm looking at a current workspace, but I'll want to customize this. Now, some of you may know how to customize it using the different workspaces. You'll see here, I can go over to the upper right on top here, and I can customize it with all these different presets if I'd like to. So you can see if you're working more with 3D elements, you can go ahead and work with 3D, graphic design, all these different things here. Now, when I choose those, all my tools will then change entirely. So I go to 3D, and you'll see, okay, that changes to all my 3D elements. Okay, I'm going to switch back to Essentials, and you'll see it goes right back to where I was. Click back over here, maybe you're working more with photography, and you'll see that many things change, right? Notice I have my layers, my channels, my paths, versus something like graphics and web. I might have something very different, right? Like my glyphs, paragraph and character, things like that. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to Essentials, and I'm going to just customize things how I want them. Okay, so this might be a little review for you just moving forward. So we're going to ramp up as we go. So let's just say, for example, I don't necessarily care too much about channels. So I'm just going to right click, I'm going to say close, and that goes away. That's great. But let's say I want layers way up on top. I can go ahead and just bring that right up, and you see I get my little blue halo, drag that over there, and then drag this over to the left. So I have lots of flexibility in how I want to work with this. All right, now I'm also going to go over to this section over here where I have all my tools, and I'm going to make it so this left column here is 2 columns now. I find that a little bit easier to work with. I also want to make sure that my tools up on top are showing. So if you click on Window, you'll see that you're going to see you have your tools and your options down below. So if I click on Options, notice how those all go away. Click on that, and they come right back. Okay? Now, let's explore things a little bit deeper. Now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's say I'm pretty comfortable with the way things are right now, but I'm looking at my tools here and I notice that maybe some are missing, and then maybe there's too much here. It's a little bit confusing. I have more than what I need. One really excellent tool that Photoshop has now that they did not always have is this option to edit the toolbar. Okay, editing the toolbar is amazing because all of these options here can be customized by you and for you, and whatever your interest levels are, whatever projects you're working on. Okay, so I'm going to click on this here, and you'll notice it just gets indented. But when I right click, I get this option here to edit the toolbar. Okay, so right clicking on the three dots takes me to this place where I can now do a normal left click. It's going to take me to this place where I can customize this toolbar. All right, and on the left-hand side, you're going to see essentially everything that I have currently. On the right-hand side is this extra tools, okay? Extra tools versus the toolbar that I currently have. Now, certain things you might not care about, certain things you do. So let's say, for example, I don't really care about this single row marquee. Okay, I can just drag that over here. Drag this over there. Great, just kind of cleaning things up a little bit. Other things you may not work with, like the slice tool, don't really use that too much, okay? That's wonderful. Okay, so other things you might want to just, okay, what about the count tool? Maybe I don't use notes. You can just go through all of these and find which ones you like and which ones you don't like. Okay, kind of nice. Now, let's say you're not super comfortable with the way the order of these things are. These are all grouped together as these individual orders. You'll see here is my move tool and my artboard tool, because guess what? These are grouped together. Like if you were to right click on this, because this has a little triangle, you'll see that there are two tools in there. But maybe I want to have these in a slightly different order from how they are currently. Okay, so again, these are all kind of groups together. So let's just say, for example, I use my lasso tool a lot and I wanted all my lasso tools in the beginning. So like in the front, in the upper left. So notice how I move my mouse to the edge versus individually. When I move my mouse on the edge, you're going to see I'm going to select the entire group and I can move that wherever I like. Great. And now you can see a little preview of it. You can see there it is right there. But that is now going to be the first set of tools that I'll be working with. I can very easily move that back again. It's very easy to kind of just slip off to working with an individual tool. So I want to just come right back over to here. And I'll bring that back down. That's great. All right. Now also note that you can move one tool into another set of tools as well. So maybe some of you are just going to say, hey, listen, I want to have all my tools under one icon set. And you can very, very easily do that. All right, so this will be something you'll want to experiment with. Of course, I'll give you a break to just practice. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the bottom. We see these options. Do you want to show these things or not? Okay, so you can see, do you want to show the shortcuts? Do you want to show all these options down below for your foreground, your background, your quick mask tool, for your screen mode? Maybe you never use those things. Let's get rid of them. So I click on that and then notice my quick mask goes away. Okay, I just want to simplify things. Again, totally up to you. Now, if you ever change your mind and you want them back, you can very simply click on that. You can very simply drag this and move it wherever you want, right? Amazing. Just really very, very cool that they give you this option to completely customize everything you want, okay? And what you don't want, and then where you want it. Now, there might be some times when you just want to save a certain preset. So you're going to be working on that set of tools and that order and that layout for certain projects, for certain clients at certain times. So what you can do is you can save a preset and then reactivate it later on if you like. Okay, so if I wanted to save this, I could just click on that, and then you'll notice here it's going to save it as this TBR custom toolbar. That's great, and then it's going to be there for me later on. I'm not going to do that for right now, but just know the options there. And then if you're working, let's say, on another computer and you wanted to load it up, maybe you switch computers, or your friend of yours, a colleague, says, hey, listen, I have it all set up, or this is what we're doing consistently across our company. You can load a preset, so therefore you don't have to do all the work. It comes right in, and then bam, there you have it. Okay, and then all your presets will be there ready to go for you to activate. So I'm going to click on Done, and now I have my new and improved toolbar. All right, now just a couple of things here with my toolbar that I'd like to do before we go to the next level of customization is I like to, number one, first of all, if you haven't done this before, is with my Move tool, I like to make sure that my Auto Select is chosen and my Show Transform controls are chosen. Now yours may look a little different. Yours actually may be an icon versus a checkbox, but it essentially accomplishes the same thing. All right, so just make sure we're all on the same page here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you can customize some keyboard shortcuts. There are a lot of keyboard shortcuts. You can see here, you can move your mouse over it, and you can see there's the move tool, there's the lasso tool, etc. And you will see that there are parentheses next to all of these. Okay, you can see parentheses L for lasso. There's a parentheses next to move, a V for move. Okay, that's great. How about type? Okay, T for type. So if I were to go to T, just literally T, not Command or Control T, and that pops right up. I'm going to go to M for marquee. I'll do V for my move tool, L for lasso. These are pretty great. So these are just regular like keyboard shortcuts over here in our toolbar. But certain things have keyboard shortcuts. Like for example, if I go to image, you'll see that there are keyboard shortcuts found here. But some of these things do not have keyboard shortcuts. Like for example, if I go to file and I want to like place embedded, right? That's something I do all the time. I would love for them to have a keyboard shortcut for that. In other programs, they do, like InDesign. I believe it's Control D, right? Love that one. Doesn't exist here in Photoshop. I'm gonna make it exist, all right? So again, this is all about you having control over your experience, making it personalized for you. So where do I go to actually set up my keyboard shortcuts? If I go over here to Edit, and I come way down here to Keyboard Shortcuts, you'll see this little menu pops up. And you'll see that I have all of my little menu items here, right? You can see File, Edit, Image, etc. All the things here that I can now go into each of the different tools and then customize the keyboard shortcut. I'm just going to show you one just so you can see how it works, how easy it is, and then we'll see it in action. I'm going to click on File. I happen to know where that is. And just notice it's showing me all the keyboard shortcuts. I could certainly override all of these if I want to, like save as. Maybe I don't want it to be that. Maybe I want to do Shift Alt S, something like that. You can absolutely do that, okay? Which this is another alternative for it as well. So you can see, so there's lots of these that, okay, I'm going to show you layer comps in a future exercise. Maybe you're doing that a lot. You want to make that into a keyboard shortcut. What we're going to focus on here is place embedded. I use that all the time. So what I'm going to do is click in this little shortcut column, and I'm just going to create my keyboard shortcuts. So I'll just do a little different one, maybe Control Shift P for place. Love that. All right, that's going to be an easy one to remember. And then I just simply say accept, and there it is. Wonderful. So I've now made this into a keyboard shortcut for me, so I don't have to do this manually anymore. All right, and then you'll want to experiment with the other some of your other favorite tools. Now you'll see that just like how I showed you with the toolbar, I'm able to now save this as well, so I can come back to it anytime I want. I can go ahead and save this for different documents, however you want to. You can always bring up different keyboard shortcuts. All right, totally up to you, but I just want you to see how awesome this is. And again, experiment on your own. I'm gonna click OK, get back out of this. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to show you here for customization is going to be around your preferences. Okay, and there's a lot of preferences within Photoshop. And you'll want to just kind of pick and choose which ones you want to play around with. I'm just going to show you kind of more some of the higher level ones that you'll want to experiment with. So if you're on the PC, you simply just go to Edit, and then you're going to go to Preferences, and then notice all the different categories I have here. If you're on the Mac, you're going to simply find the Photoshop menu in the upper left. Same thing, click on Photoshop, and then choose Preferences. So let's go to Edit, go to Preferences, and then I'm just going to go right to General, and we'll just see how it looks initially. All right, so certain things you may or may not want to do, like for example, auto show the home screen. Okay, so as soon as you open it up, does it go to the home screen? Does it go to a blank screen? Totally up to you. Maybe some of you like the older look, right? So you can see the new document interface from the legacy version of it. Absolutely, you can do that. Here's an option you might like is the skip transform when placing. Some of you, especially if you're just beginning, you might actually not want that option where it has a little bounding box around it and then you have to hit commit. Maybe you want to skip that. Okay, so you have lots and lots of options here. Again, just kind of really spice to taste. Your interface, you'll see here, I can say, hey, I want to change my interface to a totally different color. Maybe just depending on how your screen looks, how your eyes look, maybe it's your aesthetic preferences. Takes a little while to kind of like adjust your eyes, but again, up to you, however you want to do that. Now, if we go over here to Workspace, you'll see that I'm going to have a lot of different options here in terms of how I want my workspace to be shown. All right, so you notice how I have this auto collapse iconic panels. What does that mean? This area over here is known as my iconic panels. So it could be that when I click on it and I'm not using it, I want it to auto collapse. I want it to then just sort of like go back to where it was. I don't want to have to do it manually. It's just going to automatically go back. So I can set that to do that if you want to. All right. You also might want to change how your documents are opening up. Notice I have a tab up here. You might want to change that to just opening up into floating windows. If you like to do that, you can also make your tabs a little smaller. If you like to, you can see that does that. On, off, okay, just like that. All right, now let's take a look at our units. Some of you may decide that you want to change your basic unit of measure, the default, to be not inches, but pixels, because you're working more with web stuff versus print stuff. Okay, maybe picas is the way you want to go if you are working with more print stuff. Okay, so you can change that. All right, but a good rule of thumb is that you want to make sure that no documents are open when you do this, because then it will change it for all documents moving forward. All right, and then a few other things around resolution, what's going to be your default for new documents. You can change all these things here. And then some of you may be going a little bit more advanced with guides, grids, okay, and if you are working with slices. And you just might want to change the color. You also want to change the look and feel of it. Okay, so when you're working with guides, it's a really great way to stay organized and stay aligned with your content. You can change the colors of these things like really easily to pretty much most basic colors. And you can see here, you can make it dashed, you can make it just a solid line. Again, up to you, all right? And we'll talk a little bit about artboards in a little bit, but you'll see how the artboards are also going to have an opportunity to change the colors for those. And then if you are working with grids, you can not only see how you can change the color of what the grid's going to look like, but how spaced out do you want your grids to be? And this is actually a really nice tool if you're kind of building things up almost like an architect would, right? Where you actually want to have things every so inches or millimeters, something like that, to be very, very specific and have a lot of sort of perfection around things. So you want to have those grids there for when you finally do snap to those grids, everything falls in line according to that layout that you have here. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to show you is this file handling. Now, this is something that I always recommend, even in the beginner classes, to save your work often, of course, but sometimes we don't save our work, and sometimes Photoshop crashes. So this file handling will actually address some of that issue if Photoshop does crash. And you'll see that there's this option to automatically save recovery information every how many minutes. Okay, so your default most likely is going to be 10. Some of you may have it more, some of you may have it less. Okay, so I'm going to keep mine at 5 because guess what? There's a lot of genius that happened just in those last 4 minutes, or I don't want to go beyond those 5 minutes because guess what? All that might be lost if I have it at 10 minutes. So what would happen is that Photoshop will come up and say, hey, listen, I noticed that I crashed on you. My apologies. Sorry for that. But I was saving some things for you. So can I bring that up for you so then you can recover it? Okay. So fantastic. So you have all that set to go. All right. Now, one reason why you may not want to do that is because it could be challenging to your computer, to some computers, to some processing power. So you want to just make sure that it doesn't compromise your system too much. All right. Now there's a lot more options here. I recommend just going a little bit deeper into these, and certainly put on the comments if you have certain ones that you want, the community to know about. Okay, but there's really a lot to focus on. I'm giving you kind of the more high level ones, a little more than what we did in our beginner class, but certainly experiment with these, and we'd love to hear from you as far as what rises to the top for you. So I'm going to click OK. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save all of those kind of shortcuts and everything else so that I can use these over and over and over again. Okay, because right now I'm still working with essentials. Okay, and you'll notice I have one from my beginners class, this Dave's Faves. We're going to do a different one now that I've kind of gone a little bit more in terms of my tools and my shortcuts and things like that. Okay, so let me go ahead and just save that. So I'm going to just come over to the drop down. I'm going to say new workspace. I'm going to create my own. Before there was a 3D and photography and graphics, but now I'm going to have my own. Okay, so I'm going to say advanced tools and then DC for me. All right, and now notice here is panel locations will be saved in the workspace. Keyboard shortcuts, menus, and toolbars are optional. Okay, but no, I actually just customize those. Wonderful, great. Now I am set to go. I click on save. And this is exactly how I want it. I love all this stuff here. But then let's just say here I am in the future. I go a little crazy. I go here and then oops, I even lost my layers panel, my favorite thing there, my properties panel. I love that. Okay, I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Okay, and things are getting a little bit messy for me. Okay, so I like to think about this as the Mary Poppins effect, right? What did Mary Poppins do? She came in, she said, hey, children, clean up your toys. Okay, and then what did she do? She wiggled something around or said some magic potions or did something with her nose. I don't remember, but she did some pretty great magic and all the toys went into their rightful place. Place for everything and everything in its place. So how do I do that? Click on the little drop down and then notice this is selected. It's like, that's kind of weird. So what do I have to do? I have to say reset advanced tools. And then look at that. Mary Poppins is very happy. All right. So you have a lot of customization options to do. What I'm going to recommend you do is pause the video and then do whatever types of customizations you would like. And of course, this may change, by the way. So just let me just say one quick thing is that I might come back over here and say, listen, I'm not working with patterns. So I'm going to close that. And then, for example, I might want to have my colors down here, right? So I'm changing all of this stuff here, right? Which is going to happen. So what you do is you just come over to here and then I would just say new workspace again. And then it's kind of weird, but I would have to say advanced tools, DC, literally the same name. And then go to here, do the same thing. And it's going to tell me that the custom workspace advanced tools DC already exists. Do you want to replace it? I'm going to say yes. Okay. So now that has been overridden. It's a little cumbersome, right? But essentially it's like a save as. You're replacing what you've already done and then you're good to go. All right. So pause the video, practice it, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Now we've all worked with layers at this point. Okay, we've seen how layers are just the magic, really just the engine that makes Photoshop be Photoshop. So if we look at my layers panel over here, we're in the Hot Peppers 3.pst file, and you'll see that I have a lot of layers here. And notice I also have a clipping mask that's happening here. I have a group. Okay, I've got all kinds of different things here. I'm going to bring this out so I have a little more for me to work with. All right, now let's just see some of the other options within our layers panel that you may have chosen to ignore because they're relatively new. Some of you may have some experience with Photoshop, but you're not necessarily accustomed to some of the new things. And maybe you've just ignored some of the options that are available to us. All right, so let's take a look at some of these options over here up on top. Okay, so these are really extraordinary when you have lots and lots of layers. It's really great for viewing what you want to view and for filtering out for certain elements and also for searching for what you want to. Okay, so let's just take a look at what we have here. Currently, I have nothing filtered, so therefore all my options are showing here. But let's just say I only want to show just my photos. I don't really care about all my type. So I click on this little option here. You can see it says filter for pixel layers. I do that. Oh, great. So all that other stuff that I didn't really care about just kind of goes away temporarily. Click on it again, comes right back. Okay, really, really awesome. What if I only want to see my type? I click on that. That's great. I love that. Come back. All right. And you'll notice that as I'm filtering, I have this little guy here that's telling me that things are filtered out. When's that going to be important for you? It's going to be important for you when you're working on somebody else's stuff and you're just like, hey, where's all the stuff? Where, Sally, she came in and she was working on everything. Where is it? Oh, she filtered. Oh, I see. And see, they're telling you this nice little red dot. Say, okay, things are filtered. Cool. Now I know. Okay, so I can bring that back up. All right. Now, let's take a look at some of the other options here. Because currently, we would be filtering by kind, right? Not nice, but the type, right? That's what we're looking at here. Pick a filter type, right? Like our images, our adjustment layers, our type, etc. I click on this, but also note that you can click on name and then just do a search for something. Okay, so I'm just going to type out BANNER, and then look at that. Wonderful. That comes right up. So if you're looking for something, you can't find it, you can also search by name. Maybe you're working on different effects. So let me go ahead and just change this back to kind. So we're back to square one. Click on this. I'm going to choose effect. Okay. And then notice I can then look for different effects. So do I have any drop shadows here? Oh, I certainly do. And look at that. Comes right up. So it could be a situation where you're like, listen, we're not doing drop shadows anymore. That's very 90s or whatever story you're telling yourself. You can find all your drop shadows and then just change them. Just like that, right? So super easy. You'll have them all in front of you, nothing else, because it only shows those effects that are that effect that you want to work with. Let me come right back to here. And then notice that there's a whole bunch of other options here that you might want to work with. Okay, you might want to go a little bit deeper in certain things. Notice here I'm showing my different modes. We're going to talk about blending modes in just a little bit, but you can see if you're only looking at certain modes, you can then come back and activate these if you like. Maybe you're looking for certain colors. Okay, and then we're going to talk about color coding our layers in just a little bit. So notice you can then filter out certain colors. It's not about the color on the canvas, it's the color of how you color code it within the layer. I'm going to come right back here and we'll see, okay, very good, fantastic. Okay, love all this. All right, now you'll also see, if you haven't worked with these before, okay, your opacity, okay, great, you can work with that nice and easy. Okay, you can just basically make this transparent if you want to, this particular layer. You can bring that down. Okay, that's great. Okay, also note a nice little shortcut. If you're working with a little mouse wheel, you don't have to go and click on that little drop down. You can just move your mouse right on top of the number, and I'm using my mouse wheel to go up and down so I can kind of see it in real time. Saves me a little bit of time as well. Again, just move your mouse right on top of it, and then using the mouse wheel does that. And you'll also note that I can move my mouse right on top of the word opacity and bring that this way or that way. I don't see it in real time as quickly, okay, but it still does it nonetheless. All right. Now, down below, you also have these options here to lock certain things. What are you trying to lock? You're trying to just lock just my transparent pixels, right? You can just try to lock, you can see it'll tell you my image pixels, lock the position of whatever you're working with here. So you can see, or you can also prevent auto nesting into and out of artboards and frames. Okay, so basically you don't want it to necessarily just automatically fall right into a frame if it's doing that, if you are working with artboards. Some of you working with Illustrator may have some experience with artboards. And you'll see here also, I can just lock the entire thing, and then bam, I can click on the lock again, or I can click on this lock and you're good to go. All right, and then fill, as much as this will work to a certain extent for these, right? It kind of does the same thing as opacity. Generally, this is reserved for shapes. Okay, so you can actually just kind of remove the fill for these, right? But it essentially does the same thing as opacity does. All right, so great control over your layer management. Okay, so just really understand kind of what all the things you can do up on top here that you may have chosen to ignore. Now, right-clicking goes a long way with your layer management. Okay, so if I right-click on this right here, you're going to see I have a lot of options here. Okay, so one is to convert to a smart object. In my earlier class, we did talk about smart objects. So smart objects basically protect your layer, right, from actually having any kind of like a destructive nature to it, right? So any kind of things you're going to do to this particular image, it's not going to be affected if you make it into a smart object. Okay. Typically, me personally, I make something into a smart object exclusively when I'm going to put a filter on it. Okay, then it becomes a smart filter and it becomes non-destructive, and then that way I can also manipulate it. You'll see more of that in our earlier class that we published, and also later on we're going to be doing more stuff on filters just the same. All right, create clipping mask, right? I showed you how to do that in an earlier class just using the Alt key. So lots of options here that you could do with the right click, but we're going to do other ways that I showed you. Okay, and then once you have some layer styles, notice here's some other options to copy and paste layer styles. Okay, you can flatten the image, right? So therefore it's going to be no more layers at all. Maybe you want to do that, but make sure you've committed to that. And then finally, we have some of these other options here for color coding. Okay, so let me just go over here to my clipping mask group, and I'm going to make that red. And notice how the whole group then gets red. I'm going to right click on my banner. I'm going to make that yellow. Okay, and notice how that becomes yellow. And then coming back to where we were before, let's choose color, and I will choose now red, and then look at that. Because that's how I am organizing things. I'm organizing things by color. So therefore, when I only want to see that particular color, I can access it no problem. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and I can also click on this to clear out of it. All right, and that takes me right back to everything. All right, so again, another way to organize your content, and that's through right-clicking. Okay, so right-clicking really does go a long way in this program, so don't be shy about that. Okay, and you'll also see how I have a group here, right? This is a clipping mask group. Let's say I want to group other things. So how do I group things? Pretty easily. Just go ahead and select the 2 things or the 3 things or the 50 things you want to group. So I'm just going to click on the first one, hold down the Shift key. So now 2 things are selected. And very simply, I'm going to come down to this guy right here. Looks like a little folder. And click on that. And it should even tell me create a new group. And now that's a group. I'm going to simply double click on that and just call that images. Great. Lovely. And I can, of course, open that up. And I'm good to go. All right. So a lot of power working with just this amazing, amazing layers panel that you may not have experienced before. So I recommend really when you have a large document, when you have a big project you're working on and there's a lot of layers, working with all these tools to make it so you can really customize things, control things, and then filter out things however you want to, absolutely recommend that. So I'm going to pause the video for now. I'm going to have you pause the video, and then we're going to move on to something within this same document working with what we call blend modes. And blend modes are a game changer for a lot of people, and there's a lot of different ways you can use blend modes. So go ahead and pause the video. Bring up your own document if you want to, experiment, see what else is available for you, and how you can control all your layers accordingly. All right, so enjoy, and we'll see you in the next exercise on blending modes. Let's now discuss blending modes. So blending modes, as the name implies, allows us to blend together more than one object to see what type of effect we can get. It might make it darker, it might make it brighter, it might make it more luminescent. Okay, there's so many different things that we can do. And then a lot of times they're predictable. And other times it's like, wow, we don't really know how Photoshop's algorithm is going to make 2 things blend together. So we're going to be looking at several different examples of currently that are on here, but also how we can kind of move around them. Now, I also have posted a little sheet that kind of talks a little bit more about what each does. Okay, because they kind of break it down for you in kind of more kind of plain language. But really, this is a spice to taste. Sorry for the pun, now that we're looking at jalapenos. But you're going to want to really just experiment with what you see in front of you and then see how they all kind of blend together. But you'll be very pleasantly surprised. And there's a lot of different elements and different sort of contexts that you might see blend modes. So let me just show you one example. Right now, right, I am working with this clipping mask, and I have this blend mode. This is where my blend modes live on my layers panel, right, called pass through. If I click back on my banner, this should just say normal. I click on this, it says pass through. I click on that, that says normal, and that says normal. So what in fact is this doing? Well, let's just experiment. So I'm going to click on this, and I'll say normal. You can see how that changes the look and feel of how these things are now interfacing with each other. You see that? So everything that's underneath it is what's making the blend of this to all these guys here do what it's doing. Okay, so pretty extraordinary, right? To be able to get such a magical, quick effect without really a whole lot of effort. All right, let's try something else now. Let's now work with our peppers. Okay, do you see here I have my peppers? You can see they're there. And you'll notice that there is a background. Okay, you can't see that background. If I click on that, Now you can see it, right? And that's pretty cool. All right. But I want to kind of create something a little bit more interesting, a little more visual interest, something that I could not create myself. I'm going to have Photoshop do it through a blend mode. Okay, again, it's going to blend the two of these together, so my peppers are going to look a little bit different. Currently, they're not really blending at all because it just says normal, so I can't really see through this, and this is not going to, the background is not going to feed into my peppers so much because there is no blend mode. Now, let's blend them together. I'm just going to choose dissolve, and let's just go through them one by one, and I'm just, by the way, just hitting the arrow key just to go through them one by one. So I start off, dissolve, nothing too fancy. And then right away, like, ooh, darken. Darken is what it's doing, that's for sure. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because it looks like it's kind of on fire. It's like in an oven. Okay, color burn. Okay, we know burn means darken typically as well. Okay, but it's taken some of the darker colors there. And then again, you just want to sort of experiment. What is going to be the look you're looking for? How is this going to kind of tell your story without distracting things too much? Ooh, that's kind of neat. Color dodge. Some of the words we've seen before, like dodge and burn, come in here as well. Okay, and by the way, you'll just notice that these are all broken out into different sections here, right? This is a very much, you can see here is burn for darken, and for lighten, you can see there's the word dodge. Okay, and then some nice little light options here, okay, but very clean overlay. Okay, and a few other more kind of abstract ones you'll see like, oh, that's kind of an interesting one that really makes it look like it's under like hot coals. Okay, so you'll really want to experiment with all of these. Okay, now sometimes you do want to combine them with your opacity, because if it's coming a little bit too strong, maybe you want to bring down the opacity of what's underneath it, and then so therefore it's not quite as strong. You're still getting kind of a nice subtle effect there. Again, this is very much a spice to taste type of thing, right? So really experiment with it. This is a good document to experiment with, but you may have one or two things that you want to work with. Certainly type with something that's underneath it can really have a pretty extraordinary effect. So work with that. Now, you're going to see blend modes in a number of different capacities. All right, I'm just going to show you just one of them, and I will point it out as we go through our class, how you'll see them again and again and again. All right, but the more common way you'll see it is typically going to be underneath where you have your effects. Okay, so maybe you've done effects before, right? Where maybe you've done a drop shadow, you've done a glow. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to do a color overlay for this particular banner. So you'll see lots and lots of options here. I'm going to say color overlay, and it's just going to color it with black. Okay, not what I want, but sometimes that's pretty good, right? Maybe that's actually exactly what you wanted to do. That's great. Color overlay, fantastic. You'll also notice here's the option for opacity, because maybe I just want to make that just slightly kind of darkened or whatever. Now this is coming in as black, right? You can see that. I don't want this as black. So what I can do is just maybe simply go over to here and just choose this nice little fire color of orange. Okay, that's great. Love that. Still not doing what I wanted to do, obviously. I could, again, bring down my opacity and do all that. But let's see what happens if I apply a blending mode to my actual effect. So we've only done blending modes between two different layers, but now we can actually do it with this color overlay and what it is in fact overlaying. Okay, so you can see what this is going to do. Okay, so let's just see dissolve, not too much. All right, darken, something's happening. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. Oh, that's a little better. I'm starting to see some lines in there I didn't notice earlier, so I might want to affect that ahead of time. All right, so you can see how what it's doing for each of that interaction that I see here between that color and my banner. So I might like this a little bit. Notice subtract is kind of doing the opposite on the color wheel a little bit. So I can then go ahead and just blend it in a tiny, tiny bit. Maybe see what some of these abstractions can do. Okay, you just want to experiment with this, okay? That's kind of nice. Looks a little retro, kind of cool. Let's make it go harder, maybe softer. All right, love that. All right, so I'm pretty much good there. And I click OK. And notice it doesn't show up over here except for the color overlay. Okay, it doesn't show up here, but it is in fact happening. So when I double click back in color overlay, I'll be able to see that I have a blend mode on this. So it's a nice kind of like hidden trick to be able to actually affect something without affecting it on the layer proper. All right, so again, something you want to definitely experiment with. All right, and I will be pointing out once again of how we can work with different blend modes as these things come up. All right, so again, pause the video, experiment with it, see what you can do. And then what we're going to do when we come back, we're going to work with the same exact file, our hot peppers, and we're going to learn about something called layer comps. And I can assure you, you're going to love it. What is a layer comp and why do we want to use a layer comp and why are we going to love them as promised? So a layer comp is designed to give you different iterations within the same file. So if I have a client and they say, well, listen, can you just give me like 4 or 5 different versions of what you're working on here? But I want to see them all in one page. I want you to create a PDF. I want to have several different ones churned out. It's like, really? So that means that I got to now create 4 or 5 different versions and I lose the initial one I did, or I have to find those other 3. That's a bit of a pain. Layer comps are an amazing, amazing project-based tool that's going to allow you to then say, hey, listen, I want to try one with my banner down below. I want to try another one with a different kind of blend mode. You know, I want to move things around, right? You might want to just take away some of our effects. You can do that using layer comps without having to go to another document altogether in order to process it all. So currently I'm working on my layers panel. There is a panel called layer comps. So I'm going to bring that up. I'm just going to bring this over here. Don't need my notes. And for right now, I'm just going to bring over my layers this way so we can kind of see everything a little bit better. So currently I have a layer comp panel that has no layer comps on it. So what do I need to do? I need to create those layer comps. Okay, those iterations now need to be created so they can be saved and preserved and exported so I can then show them and use them. Okay, so it's really, really awesome. Okay, this is going to save you just a ton of time and make all of your clients and coworkers very happy. So this is my starting point. So I'm going to make this a layer comp where it's like I can always come back to this, or this is maybe one of the iterations I'm working with. So I want to save this. So you'll notice that down below here is a little plus sign. So I can go and click on that to say, hey, create a new layer comp. And it's going to ask me, oh, what's the name of this going to be? All right. And I could just call this orange banner top. Okay. And then I'll just call this pass through blend, whatever you want to call it. Okay. And then you can put some notes here and here if you want to, right? So especially if you're working collaboratively, you'll want to put some notes here. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to do that right now, but certainly know you can do that. And then what are you now preserving? Okay, your visibility, your position, your appearance, absolutely everything. I want everything to be preserved. I click OK, and now I have a new layer comp. Right now, let's see what we can do if I make some changes. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and just turn off this effect. All right, so just keep it at that. That's my very simple new layer comp I'm going to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on my plus sign. And this time it's going to be green banner pass through. All right, same deal. Okay, great. Now I have 2 layer comps. This is the one I'm currently on. Now let's make some other changes here. Let's say I want to experiment with my blend mode to be a little bit something else here. So let's just try this little fiery one there. Love that. That's pretty great. And that's it. Just making one simple change, totally up to you. Go to here. All right. And I'm just going to say, let's make sure I remember what that's called. That is my color dodge. Color dodge peppers. Okay. And then again, green banner top. Click OK. All right. And then let's just do one more. Let's go. We'll be a little more dramatic where I'm going to now move this banner way down below. So I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag while holding down the Shift key. So it keeps it in straight line. Great, keeps aligned. And now I'm going to go over to my clipping mask. And then I'm just going to bring that up using my arrow keys, holding down my Shift key to make it go a little bit farther and faster. And then, okay, great. Something completely different now. Just trying it out. Why not? So I'm going to click on my little plus sign. I'm going to say banner, green, bottom. Okay, and then we'll just keep it dodge, blend. Okay, wonderful. That's great. Now I have 4 different iterations. Okay, cool. All right. Now let's just see it in action. So when I click over here, it takes me right back to what I want to work on, right? And then notice how I clicked on the left-hand side, not right here on the words. I clicked on this left banner to then activate it. So you can see I can go from here to here to here to here. Oh, look at that. Big jump, big jump, big jump. All right. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, what if I want things to change a little bit, right? So for this one, you know, it's a little maybe I wanted to do for the bottom one. I actually want to do a different blend mode for the banner one on the bottom. So guess what? I can now make a change to this currently. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to make a change to this. So it's going to be a little bit different. Okay, let's do that. A little greener. Okay, linear, light. So guess what I can do now? I can then refresh it and update it based off of what, let me go ahead and zoom in here so you can see what we're looking at. Just that guy right there. Basically saying, hey, update this blend mode with what you currently see on the screen. So I click on that and then bam, there that is. Okay, so if I compare the two, they are now different. Okay, and if I double click on that, I can then go back to here and I can say, hey, listen, this is going to be a linear light blend mode. Okay, great. Now that's all set. All right, so that's great in and of itself. But now the power comes in the fact that we can then export all of these individual layer comps as individual files, PDFs, PSDs, JPEGs, PNGs, you name it, whatever you want. So they're all going to be separate from each other. So how do we do that? If we go over to here to File, you're going to see way down on the bottom, there's going to be this set of exports. Okay, and you're going to see here is this option for layer comps to files, layer comps to PDF. So I'm going to click on Files for right now. And it's going to ask me very simply, where do you want to put it? So I'm going to click on Browse. All right, and I'm going to put this in my class folder here. All right, bam, there it's going to go. And then here is it's asking me my file name prefix, right? Just the name of the file. I'm going to keep that. That's great. And then it's asking me, well, what file type do you want to export this as? So when I click on the dropdown, notice I can do a JPEG, a PDF, right? A TIFF, all kinds of different PNG options there. Okay, that's great. So let me just do a JPEG for right now. Notice you can adjust the quality. Let's make that super high quality. Click on Run and then just watch the magic happen. Joot, 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 right? Just processing everything, processing everything. Layer comps to files was successful. Great. So now let's go ahead and see where they ended up and what they look like. Fantastic. Awesome. 1, 2, 3, 4 different JPEGs for me to work with, right? To me to share, me to put into a newsletter, me to put in a contact sheet, however you want to do it. But now notice I just have them, I can click on them, and they're going to be just these individual layers that I've created one by one by one. Look at that. Now I have them, saving me a ton of trouble in the future. Let's do it one more time. Let's do it for PDF. So File, Export. I'm going to say Layer Comps to PDF, right? And then let's put it maybe in the same folder. Okay, and then we'll just call up peppers. All right, and then notice it does give me the option here To advance it, in case you're doing a slideshow, I don't really care about that. I'm not doing a slideshow, but maybe you are. So you can absolutely do that if you want to. Notice you also have the option to only export selected layer comps. Again, totally up to you. So let me click on Run. Same process, churning it out, doing the script. Running through each layer comp, then it tells me it's successful, where it's going to go to. That's great. And now come over to here and look at that. One PDF, name Peppers, and I click on that. And we'll be able to see, it's going to say don't care about screen mode. So right now we'll be able to see all the pages, look at that, in one PDF. It is absolutely amazing. All right, so let me just come right back to here. And I want to encourage you again to pause the video, try this out yourself with any kind of thing that you're working with where you're manipulating the layers to then just have, different iterations. Okay, if you're working on different projects, absolutely, hopefully you see the value in this and give you some time to practice, and then we will come back with our next exercise. Have fun. Switching up gears a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about shapes, illustrations, vectors, working with the direct selection tool. And you're going to see how, although we're in Photoshop and not Illustrator, this is really going to serve you well, working with understanding how shapes work, just in terms of your graphic design capabilities, because these types of things occur everywhere. You'll see them inside of posters, you'll see them in newsletters, but understanding also how we can master things like our direct selection tool will help us with different types of selection techniques, which we'll move forward to later on, to be a little more advanced with our selection techniques. So you probably know already, we have a bunch of shapes that we can work with, right? So you can see here, I can just choose a rectangle, rounded rectangle, etc. I can also choose what color I'll be going to. I can also choose a color from here. Let me go ahead and just choose a solid color, nice little magenta there. Okay, that's great. I can also choose what stroke, the thickness of the stroke, etc. Okay, so let me just do a very basic perfect circle by holding down the Shift key. Great, perfect. And then I can go ahead and move that. Maybe I'm going to be a little more kind of avant-garde. It comes a little bit off, creates a little bit of motion. All right, that's great. And then I can also do the Alt key or Option key in the Mac to clone that. Maybe I move this over here. Okay, great, wonderful. I can go over to my appearance panel and change the color to something else. Very easy. Okay, so maybe you've seen that before, super easy. Okay, sometimes you might want to work with the polygon tool. Okay, so if I click on that now, you will see with my polygon tool, I can then click and just say, hey, listen, how many sides is my polygon going to be? You'll also notice that up on top, it's also giving me the option to say, hey, listen, how many sides do you want it to be? And when you look at your properties panel a little bit, you'll see it's going to give you some similar options there even after the fact. So let's just say I just want to do a very simple pentagon. It's great. And then my star ratio is actually going to be 100 because I'm not doing a star. So make sure you keep an eye on that. Corner radius is going to be 0. And now I have that. That's great. And I can resize this just like anything else, holding down the Shift key to constrain proportions. And there you have it. All right, let me bring my properties panel up a little bit so we can see some different choices that I have here. And you'll notice how I can okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and resize that, holding down the Shift key. And then don't forget to apply and commit what you're working on. Now let's bring out my properties panel, and I will see that I have all the options, like we saw the color fill, okay, as well as the ability to then actually change the sides here right there on the fly. So I just want to do that. Notice I can very, very easily do that. Let's just make that into a 6-sided shape. Okay, that's great. And then maybe I want to work with a 20 pixel corner radius. Let's make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. And that's a nice little shape very quickly and easily. Now you also have the option to do stars. So let's take a look at stars. So again, choose your polygon tool. I'm just going to click anywhere, and you will see that there's an option that comes up for how many sides you want, corner radius, same thing. But now we're going to talk about our star ratio. If you're planning on doing a star, this is kind of a neat thing. So how many star sides do I want? How many kind of points do I want? So I'm just going to say 10. It's a nice star. And then I have to say here, well, how is my star ratio going to be in here? So you'll see what that looks like. Essentially, it's going to be sort of the radius, if you will. Okay, so I'm just going to say, okay. And now, just like that, I've created a pretty neat star. Resize it if you like. Change the color if you like. Okay, wonderful. Maybe you're even working with gradients. Maybe you're comfortable with gradients at this point. Notice you can very easily apply these. Okay, that's great. Let me just go over here to radial. It's kind of nice. That's even nicer. Awesome. Wow, look how much stuff I can do so quickly and easily just from my properties panel. And then I'm going to go even crazier, where I'm going to make this a 20 pointed star. And just like that, it now becomes kind of a cool little sun. Okay. So really, really neat stuff. Okay. Now what we're looking at here is just an overview, a little review for some of you on shapes. Okay. Now this is just the beginning. There's so much we can do. All right. These are known as vectors. Okay. So this is a vector shape. So essentially what that means, just kind of putting it into quick layman's terms, that I can make this as big as I want, and the lines get very, very smooth, right? They maintain their smoothness, no problem there, okay? So as opposed to a bitmap image, as opposed to a JPEG, which is going to actually lose some of its resolution if you make it too big, bigger than its initial resolution, okay? But a vector image will not lose it, all right? So let's see what we can do now that we have a vector option in front of us here. So let's see what the direct selection tool can do for us, the direct selection tool. What that's going to do is going to allow us to play with the vector points or path points, right? You might hear them be called. Okay, so all of this, let's say I want to really customize all these little spikes on the star to be a little bit less uniform. I can control that, no problem, using my direct selection tool. Okay, not this one, but it's going to be this guy right here. So you'll see here. How I get to it. So click on that. And it even tells me select the individual points and segments of a path, right? So these are all called paths. So you also might hear it called path points. So everything gets very activated as I do that. Now, if I click directly on one of them, notice how this one gets dark blue and the rest of these are hollow. See that? Hollow, hollow. But this one is solid because I decided to select on that. So I'm going to go ahead and click it, and then watch me as I click and drag, stretching that out. Okay? The operation will turn a live shape into a regular path. Yes, I want that. So very good. Now it's become kind of an official path and a shape, giving me all of the power in the world now to then play around with this. Let's make it kind of not so perfectly uniform. This is going to go way out here. This one maybe out here. Maybe his neighbor is going to be way out here. Okay, so you can see all the things that we can do to manipulate this shape. Okay, let's just go to another one. I just bring this over here, come back to my regular move tool, and let's just move that out of the way for a moment. And let's go over to here, go back to my direct selection tool. And then when I click on this one, you'll notice it's going to be a little bit different. Okay, it's going to be a little bit different because I have curves here. Okay, so when I click on this one, you'll notice that there's going to be these little guys right there. Okay, these are known as your Bezier handles. And by the way, this is a really nice introduction for Illustrator, by the way. So understanding how the direct selection tool works and also these little Bezier handles. But notice how you have this little option right here, and you also have this little option right here. This is now connected more to the shape itself, but this will actually control the curvature and the sort of magnitude of that curve, okay, as opposed to just like a hard right angle. So if I just simply click and drag this out, notice I'm just kind of making it kind of longer, okay, making it sort of bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes again. And this time, I'm just going to use this little Bezier handle, and then watch what happens to this little curve right here as I do that. Click and drag out like that. And maybe I want to match this to be out like that. And then I'm going to drag this guy here. And then notice I can start making a pretty unusual shape very quickly and easily. I just started off with this shape, but then I was able to then manipulate each individual path point to make it what I want to be. Okay, so really cool, really easy to work with, okay, in case you want to manipulate your own. Now, I'm going to show you in a future exercise about how we can make our type get converted into shapes. So therefore, you can almost kind of create your own font, if you will. All right, so let's just do one other thing with shapes before we convert something to a clipping mask. We'll see how we can work with shapes and clipping masks. But we're going to use the custom shape tool. So I click on that. And nothing really happens, but you will see that you're going to have an option over here for shape. And then showing right now is the most recent shape that I've worked with. Okay, so I'm going to click on the drop down. I'll be able to see all of these individual shape categories that I have available to me. You'll also notice I have some legacy shapes, and there's even more and more and more hiding in there. Okay, lots and lots of options. And then you'll also notice that under the window menu, you're going to have a shapes option right there. And then you can always click on this little flyout menu, and then you can also just organize things in the way that you want to, and then even bring in the legacy shapes if you don't currently have them. All right, so shapes. Essentially, these are going to be a little bit more graphic, a little bit more kind of like complete, right? Not so basic versions of different drawings, if you will, right? So I can just very easily bring out some of these and then manipulate them if I want to, or just keep them as is. So this is very beautiful. I love this. Okay, and look at that. Really nice. They've done all the work for me. That's great. All right, let me bring in something a little different. Commit to that. Okay, let's just bring in this beautiful rhinoceros. Okay, I'm just creating a scene here. You can see maybe this is even the beginning of my logo. Photoshop is doing a lot of the work for me. So this is a shape. So guess what? I can manipulate this, right? Let's just say this horn, I want to manipulate that. Okay, how do I do that? I just simply go right back to my direct selection tool. Notice all my path points now arrive. And guess what? I can then go zoom really in so I can see, okay, what am I selecting here? I can go right to that path point with my direct selection tool. And now, bam, I can then manipulate this a little more. So it's a little bit more pointy, right? Maybe going up higher like that. You can go nuts. Maybe you don't even want to see this part here. You can control all that. So this is a shape that Photoshop created for us as a vector, but we're able to control it and own it and do whatever you'd like. Okay, so pretty neat, right? A lot of cool stuff here. Okay, so I now have another image that I'm working with that's over here in this cube of curves. I'm just going to drag that up into here, drag that back down here, and I would like to just maybe put her inside of this star. Whoa, that's kind of interesting. I can do that. Well, let's just try it out. I don't know. So I'm going to bring my background up above. I'm going to unlock her just like that. She goes away. And now guess what? I can do a clipping mask with the shape. All right, if you followed along in my last class that I taught for my intro, we learned about clipping masks with basic text and basic JPEGs. But text essentially kind of acts as a shape in a way for you to frame your image however you want to do it. So if I want to make this clip into this, very simply hold on the Alt or Option key and click. And look at that. How cool is that? Now she is the star. She is living inside of this little sun. And I can do all kinds of interesting things here. Let me go ahead and just bring in a solid color background. Let me bring that down underneath. Okay, cool, fun. Maybe you want to go a step further, do a gradient background instead. Okay, you can do that just the same, have lots of fun with it. And then just bring that down below. Okay, a little bit of a different look, but you can see how you can combine all of that knowledge now to then manipulate your shapes, right? Of course, I can manipulate this now again, even if I wanted to now play around with these stars, I can easily do that. Now bring this up a little more, show some of the image. You have all the control in the world to be as creative as you want with kind of minimal effort, you know, kind of cool. Now I can see more of that image that I couldn't see otherwise. Okay, so what I want you to do is pause the video and start experimenting with shapes. If this is the first time you're working with shapes, start slowly, work with some of the basic shapes, and then see what happens when you manipulate it with your direct selection tool, and then maybe bring in some of your custom shapes, see what you can do there, change the colors, apply a gradient if you like, right? And then, just as a bonus, if you want to do something fun like this, where you can do a clipping mask, practice that as well. Okay, enjoy, and we'll see you in the next video. Let's talk about text, baby. We're gonna go a little bit deeper than you might have gone with text in the past, where we're not going to be doing about typography and leading and all that stuff. You can watch our intro class on that. We're going to talk about how we can work with type as shapes, and also why we want to do that, and then also how we can work with type on a path as well. Okay, so why would we want to do type as shape? Number one, you may have your type coming in when you're printing it slightly pixelated. Okay, so when that happens, you want to do what we call creating as outlines or converting it to shape. So your printer might say like, hey, listen, it's coming a little pixelated. Can you convert them to shapes? So if I were to try to print this, it's going to look a little jagged or whatever it is, just because it reads it as like a bitmap. If you convert that to a shape, that'll address that problem. That's going to be number one. Another reason you might want to do that is to be able to kind of create custom fonts, right? I like this, but I don't love it, so I might want to change it. It's a starting point for me. So you can be super creative and then make your text look exactly how you want it to. Okay, so really cool. So what can we do? How do we do it? So right now, this is just a regular type that I just typed out, right? No big deal here. Okay, just click on it. Okay, that's great. Now you'll also notice, bring my layers panel out here. I have this Photoshop layer. It's a type layer. You can see there that is. Now I'm going to right click on that, and you're going to see there's this option here to convert to shape. Okay, so if anybody ever says like, hey, create outlines out of it, in Photoshop, this is how you do it. In other programs like InDesign and Illustrator, they literally say create outlines. So I'm going to click on convert to shape, and you'll see just like that, it's going to look very familiar if you watched our last exercise about how we worked with shapes themselves. Okay, so now they're all individual shapes. Okay, they're not manipulatable anymore as type, just know that. All right, but I'm going to have all the control in the world now to just select this, this, and this all independently as individual shapes. And of course, you'll notice how I get all these individual path points for me to work with. Okay, so let's just say I wanted to make this H look a little different, right? Let's make it kind of like a metal kind of look, right? Like metal, like heavy metal. So if I click on this now, using my direct selection tool, notice how I get all my hollow white path points, and now I get this solid one. I can just simply click and drag that up. Let's do this. Very different look now. Okay, just like that. Okay, maybe I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller, kind of be a little more fun. Okay, cool. All right, so just a little bit of a different look, because now these are individual shapes that I can work with. Okay, so really cool, excellent. So just, you want to kind of play around with these just the same. Now, we have not gone deeper into working with shapes in terms of the pen tool, I'm going to show you one little excellent kind of featurette that lives inside of the pen tool, and that is to convert points. Okay, we have not worked with any of these to actually draw some things. That's a little bit out of the scope of this class, but we may dabble a little bit of that when we get into our advanced selection. But what we're going to do here is convert the point. What does that mean? Convert the point. Let's say I want these to be rounded. I don't want them to be this kind of like hard angle. So if I click on convert point and then I click and drag on this, I've now got a nice little bubbly, see that? Now it's going to look like that. Okay, and then maybe you've converted that to a microphone. Cool, that could be kind of fun. Or maybe you're going to make it into a paintbrush, something like that, right? Whatever you want to make it to kind of communicate what you're trying to communicate. Now I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and now I select both using my direct selection tool. This is selected, and this is selected. And I'm just going to use my arrow keys, bring that down, bring that up. Okay, just see how much control you have over this now that we've converted it to a shape. So you can be super creative with this. Now, these are still seen as a group. So in order to actually like excise these, sort of excavate them from this whole group, you would need to put them on their own individual layer. So if I go over to here and I just say the path selection tool and I select one of these shapes, notice I can go ahead and select it. Okay, and the path selection tool is living in with the direct selection tool, selects the whole shape inside of here. And then I do something that maybe some of you know already. I go to layer, new, and then layer via cut. It then will create its own layer for that object. Because otherwise, if I don't do that, if I make a change to this, it changes all of them. So as an example, if I click on this right now, when I make this its own color, I can now do that. If I choose, let's just say, this layer here with all my other letters, okay, and I make a change to it, it changes all of them. Do you see that? So what I need to do is now just extract this out. So I'm going to go back to my path selection tool. I click on, let's just say this P, go over to here to layer, new, and then shape layer via cut. And this is a good keyboard shortcut to remember. And now see, this is going to be separate. So I might want to actually name these if that's going to be the case, right? Just to make that a P. Okay. And then I can change the color of this. So I can have all the control in the world now to make each individual letter its own individual color. And I can go ahead and move it someplace else. I can have a lot more fun with it because they're all now going to be kind of separate from each other. I can rotate it. So you can actually kind of treat them like shapes, but it's going to spell something out. Okay, so next level thing we're going to do is work with type on a path. And you can see type on a path is relatively straightforward working with Photoshop, as opposed to other programs where you actually have to activate type on a path. So what is type on a path? I have a little path here and I want to put some type on here. Okay, and your path could be anything. If you know how to actually draw out some paths, it might be around a mountain, a cloud, a star, something like that. We're going to keep it nice and simple for right now. So I'm going to just choose my basic type tool. And you're going to see, I'm just going to kind of zoom in a little bit. You're going to see as I move my mouse with my type tool over the shape. Okay, let's go ahead and just make this shape active. And I move my mouse over it, you're going to see very faintly a little circle. And then as soon as I move my mouse right over the edge, you're going to see a little wavy line. I'm just going to go ahead and click. And you say, whoa, what does that do? It brings in a whole bunch of type based off of whatever the last font size I chose. And it also brings in all this lorem ipsum. You may have seen this before. So I wanted to use this as sort of a teachable moment to come back to our preferences so you can see maybe I don't want this coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit escape and undo. So you can see back to edit and then preferences. There's an option here for type. And if you don't like all that lorem ipsum, you can see here is fill new type layers with placeholder text. So if you don't want that, go over here to the type tab and then just uncheck that and it will no longer come in. But sometimes it's a good idea because like for me, that font came in really big. So I was at least able to know what it was. But just know that you have the option to turn that off if you like. Okay, and also just keep in mind what size font you're going to be applying right when you create the text box. I'm just going to go ahead and click, and then I'm just going to say around the world with Photoshop. Okay, and this is now text that I can easily highlight, change the color of it, whatever I'd like to do. Maybe I want to change it, use it to the same color here, or you can put all kinds of different things on here if you like, in terms of a stroke, right? Drop shadow, all that good stuff. And now here comes the little bit of a tricky part. How do you move it around and around the actual shape itself? We're going to come back over to here to our direct selection tool. And I want you to notice that when I select it, I can find this, oops, not that one. Okay, I'll be able to find it. I told you it was tricky. Okay, you're going to see that there's going to be like a little arrow right there that appears, a tiny, tiny little guy right there. You can barely see it. It's like a little triangle that tells me where it's going to begin. Over here, you can see now that little line appears. Then it also shows me over here, as I'm clicking and dragging, look to the left, like kind of where the equator is. This is going to show me where it's going to end. Kind of disappears a little bit. Okay, this is a very unintuitive way that they're doing things, right? So you can see, okay, things kind of like disappear on me. Okay, because things got a little bit too sort of short for it. So the text box essentially got a little bit too short. So we want to kind of play around and understand that it's conforming to whatever kind of text you have beginning and also ending. Okay, so if you have any extra spaces there, just kind of play around with it to understand what it's in fact doing. Okay, but you can control that nicely and easily, and you can do all kinds of great things working with type on a path. All right, and let's just do one last set of options here. I'm going to draw out another set of options working with Photoshop. Make that nice and big. And by the way, good keyboard shortcut, what I'm using right now is Control Shift and then like the little right arrow or the period. And you can see that actually will make the text grow in real time. So I don't have to use my pesky old mouse. Okay, love that. There that is. And now I'm going to select my type and go over to here to this option that you may have chosen to ignore to be able to do some warping of my text. I click on that and you're going to see that there are some presets that you can say, listen, I'm going to just do a little arch. Maybe not so much. Bring that down a little bit. Okay. Maybe you want to distort things a little bit, kind of make it kind of superhero style. Absolutely, you can do that. Try another one. Let's just do bulge. Okay. Again, make that grow a little bit, bring that in, kind of even it out a little bit. Great. And again, this is one of those things where you just do spice to taste, how you want to kind of have it at the end. You can always come back to it, no problem. I click OK, click away from it. And you'll notice that unlike working with shapes, this is still type. So I can treat it as type. I can come back here and I can just add on a little exclamation point if I want to. Great. I come over to here, I can add in maybe a little bit of a stroke, drop shadow, all kinds of different things here very easily. Okay, there that is. That's great. I'm going to keep that there just for the sake of the exercise. And then again, if I decide I want to play around with this again, I can just double click on the T, go over here to my T again, and then play around with it and maybe do something completely different. All right, so again, pause the video, play around with this. Notice that you have all the control in the world to be very creative with type, making them into shapes, and understand the reason why we do this is for visual and graphic elements, but also for when you're sending it to the printer so you can have cleaner edges as well. Okay, so have fun, play around, and we'll see you in the next exercise. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're enjoying your exercises. In this lesson, we are going to cover 3D text. How do we convert our text, our type, into 3D? First thing I want to tell you, it's a good idea to use a font that's going to be nice, big, and blocky like this before you convert it. So if we take a look, our font is Luckiest Guy. You can see that's what I'm using right there, but you can use the font of your choice. So how do I make this into 3D? Very simply, we're going to just double click on the T. That selects all the text, and you will see that I get this little option here that says 3D that I can now activate. So I'm going to click on that. And what it does is it automatically takes me into this 3D space, okay? This 3D workspace. Maybe some of you have seen this before. When you click on this little drop down, there's an option for 3D. Probably never really had a need for it. Now you do, all right? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to just stay within the properties panel, because working with all this stuff here, right, to move it around and click and drag it, as tempting as that may seem to do that, it can actually be not super intuitive and very clumsy. So we're going to use all the options here and a couple of the options here to play around with 3D. All right, so the first thing you'll notice again is my properties panel, and you'll see that there are these tabs up on top that I can then play around with, and there's a few other options down below that correspond to whatever those tabs are. So let's just see what I can work with first of all. There is this shape preset for my 3D. Okay, so that's pretty cool how it comes in right now, but I might want to do a totally different one. So you can see there's a whole bunch of ones that are a little bit crazier, a little bit kind of like twirly and things like that. I click on this and you'll see slight change, slight change, slight change. I'm going to go over to that one. A little bigger of a change, right? No thanks, but the options are there if you want them. I can very easily go right back here. Right. You'll also notice that I can adjust the extrusion depth, right? That's what this guy is here, that guy over there, the light gray that I see. So if I now just bring this out like that, and notice how it gets more extruded, okay? So pretty cool. So great. So I'm going to make it go just a little more out like that, a little more three-dimensional, right? A little more visual interest, a little more depth. Now over here, I can change the color of this. So of the foreground. So let's just change this to this nice color green. You'll see how it changes right there on the fly. Love that. Just make sure your intensity is at a place where you want it to be. Okay, because it could sometimes, for whatever reason, just kind of be up here or down there. So I'm just going to make that maybe like that. Of course, you can always come back and change it. So that's going to be my foreground there, no problem. All right, so I'm pretty cool here. Just notice also if I wanted to, I can edit the source. And let me just show you what that's going to do. If I click on that, that's essentially going to take me right back to my font here. And if I want to change this to Rome or the Colosseum or Piazza or Pizza or whatever you want to do, you can easily change that. Now, what you may not notice is that it actually creates a new tab with a new file, which is this PSB file, which that's essentially just kind of spitting out kind of a temporary thing for me here. So I don't need that. I'm just going to go ahead and say close. Because I'm not making any changes, I'll just say yes anyway. And then it takes me right back to where I was. Okay, so in case you are making those changes, just know it's very subtle. It creates a new tab here. So let's continue on with our properties. Let's go to here and notice where am I? I am in my deform. All right, so what do you want to do here? So here's another option for my extrusion depth. All right, so it's doing that. All right, that's kind of cool. Yours may be doing something a little bit different because potentially you have a different set of elements here. Like you maybe are adding on your twist, right? Oh, that's kind of fun. Or maybe not so much, but you can see, all right, welcome to Italy. Okay, the home of the pinwheel. All right, I'm going to bring that back to 0. And taper might be something you're interested in because it does that, or it can do that, which I really like. See that? It's kind of like dun dun dun, and then it's just sort of like a superhero. Let's bring that down a little bit. Notice what I'm doing. So, but totally up to you. You have those options, whatever you'd like. All right. And then you can experiment with some of these as well, because notice how you can play around with which is it the X or the Y in terms of the angles that it's coming in. You can kind of control each of those. You can see how that's going that way. Let's come this way. I'm just using my mouse wheel. You can see maybe you want it to point down that way. So it's left, right, up or down. Again, you have that kind of control over how your extrusion's going to go. All right, let's come back up. And by the way, again, here's your presets one more time. Let's come over to this tab, cap. And cap is essentially like, I have a little bit of a cap on mine since the last time I worked on this, but let me just show you what it's going to look like. And we can play around with different ones. You can see how we add a little bit of thing there. We can just add on more or less. Bring that down to whatever. Essentially what this is doing is playing around with this kind of a bevel effect. Again, do you like that or not? Play around with that. Okay, you can see, oh, that's interesting. A little more sort of chiseled, if you will. And there are some presets. Love them or hate them. They're there. Okay, kind of neat. And then also it's asking me, well, which one are you playing around with? The front or the back or the front and back? So you have some consistency. Again, play around with that. So it's looking pretty good. And now that I've had a few more kind of width and angles that I play around with, let me just go ahead and just play around with the strength of it. And then again, the angle now a little bit more, a little bit less. All right, very much spice to taste with this, but it's really understanding how to work with these things, all right? Try not to go too much on the canvas, like I said, because that will just make you go crazy because it doesn't work very well. All right, so let's go, well, it works, but it's just not super intuitive. And that's where this part comes in here, and that's the coordinates, because that's really the part that kind of throws people, because when you try to go over to here, you try to like click and drag and do all kinds of stuff over there. It's when it doesn't really kind of do what you expect it to do, in my opinion, at least. All right, so that's why I like to work with these areas here. So let's just see what this is going to do. To see, I can make this go left, make it go right. You can see I'm just moving it, right? Moving the X, moving the Y. Like I said, it's up and down or left and right. And you'll see what the Z does. It's just like, oh, it's just coming at you. Cool, just kind of making it grow a little bit. That's your Z axis. Let's take a look at our angles now. Let's see, what does this do? All right, and let's see what this does. Oh, okay, things are starting to get a little more interesting, right? You can start to see the sort of three-dimensionality of it. So let me just change this to like 25. You can see that. Let's change this to maybe negative 25. Oh, interesting. Do I like that? I don't know. Let's just bring that down to maybe negative 10. And let's just bring this down just to 10. Cool. So I got something happening here. All right. And of course, you can come back and change it if you don't like the twist, whatever it is. Just know what your options are and how we can play around with them. All right. This one is just going to be our scale. You can see dimensions or percent, however you want to do that. So you can see, all right, that's coming in like that, or that's coming in like that, depending on which part you're looking at, right? The X or the Y, you can see they all kind of work together in unison. And very easily you could reset it back if you like. Okay, and then finally you'll see here I can play around with different elements on here as well. So you can see paint system, texture, projection. Right, okay, that didn't go very well, so I'm going to come right back to what that is. And you can see how it also kind of like messed with my computer system a little bit. This does take a lot of processing power, so just understand that. Okay, now I would like to change maybe this little green area here. Okay, so I want to actually play around with what we're looking at as the Italy extrusion material. So you'll notice how as I choose these, each individual one, okay, I'm going to get different choices depending on what I want to work with. So all of these are their own kind of individual set of properties. We've been looking at all of Italy right here. So that's actually adjusting everything. All right, but I'm only going to work with this extrusion material. And you'll see that I have some options like glow, metallic, roughness. And again, this is going to be very much spice to taste. Play around with whatever's going to work for you. But let's see what we can do if we change, for example, some of these presets. And I just change this to like gold. You'll see, just like that, that changes here. And you'll see that there's my base color, my interior color. Okay, kind of neat. Let me just go ahead and bring up the glow a little bit. So I can see, oh, that's kind of neat. Going a little more metallic. The roughness, See what the height does. Some of these things are not going to do too much. Okay, let's just see what the translucence is going to do. Oh, interesting. Okay, so just kind of play around with these things. Density, combine some of these things here, see what they do. All right, so I'm good to go with this. I love this. This is great. I want to bring this back to where I was before. So I'm just going to simply go back to my layers. I'm going to click on my background layer. And now here I am back here. And I can see here's all my layers, right? I'm still kind of in this 3D mode, more or less. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this Italy layer and I'm just going to say rasterize. You could say render 3D layer. That takes a long time to do it. Okay, and you'll see that you might actually have a little more options to do that, and then it's actually going to give you special kind of format for it. But for our purposes right now, you're essentially going to get kind of a good deal with this. We're just saying rasterize 3D layer, and then it takes me to that, and it's great, right? So it's no longer, I don't have the ability to then like play around with it anymore. I'm pretty much committed to this because what I want to show you can do is you can now play around with individual parts of this if you like. Okay, so like, let's say I wanted to put a stroke, kind of something subtle on this or something else on this kind of little foreground here. I can do that. So now that I have made this into a rasterized object, I'm able to now maybe isolate certain parts of this to maybe have some more control over it. You know, maybe there's different elements you want to do to this. Maybe you want to change the color of each individual thing here. Maybe you want to put a stroke on it, that type of thing. All right, so with my Italy layer selected, I'm just going to very easily go to my quick selection tool, and then you can see I can just very slowly and carefully select that, and then hold down my, actually it might even be better to do my magic wand tool. Since they're all kind of green, bring down my tolerance, bam, 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 holding down the shift key. That's great. All right, so now what I could do in this case is now right click on this and just say layer via copy or layer via cut. I'm just going to say copy. I now have a new layer there. And then I'm able to do all kinds of different things with this one separately, yet while still maintaining my 3D. So let's just see what I can do. Let's just add on a stroke to that. That's kind of cool. I like that. Let's make it even thicker. Let's see what that does. Let's bring up the opacity. What does that do? All right. Maybe you want to just do all kinds of different things. Put a blend mode on there. Fill type. Maybe you're going to work with a pattern, right? So whatever. Just go crazy with whatever you want to do, but just know how I have control over this, right? Completely separate from what I did underneath there. All right. So again, I'll just leave that. And I'm pretty much good to go. I'm very happy with what I've done here. A nice 3D, which I can now move around together. Move them around. Notice I have a nice little shadow there. And I can maybe take away the stroke if I want to do that anymore. Actually, I kind of like it without the stroke. Great. 3D type very easily once you understand how the system works. All right. So again, just want to repeat. Try not to work with the stuff that's in the middle with the click and drag, because it will be, in my experience, kind of an exercise in frustration. Just use those tabs there. But have fun. Love to see in the comments what you've done with this. Take a break, pause the video, practice it. Remember to start with some big blocky text, and have fun. See you in the next video. This next set of videos is going to be about advanced selection. Okay, we've probably seen how we can do selection with our marquee tools and with our lasso and with our quick selection tools and, you know, our magic wands and all that good stuff here. Sometimes you're going to be combining one with the other. So I'm going to break up this lesson segment into two. Where we're going to actually show you one type of advanced selection tool, and then I'm going to show you how we can actually work with selecting hair using something that's called the Smart Radius. Okay, so let's just first see what we can do to kind of have a little bit more precise and smoother selections for our objects using something called paths. So we're going to start off just by using a regular selection, right? So I'm just going to just kind of do a little sloppy, very quick selection using my quick selection tool. And that's a nice size. And to get a little bit too much there, don't worry about it. I'm just going to go ahead and bring that in over there. Maybe you want to zoom in. I'm going to hold down the Option key, and then notice how the Option key brings in my selection. I'm going to go very slowly, very methodically. Okay. And again, I'm not going to worry about getting it super perfect for right now because we're going to use the next tool I'm going to show you. All right. So what we're going to do next is we're going to learn about how we can use path points to be able to have a little more precise and smoother selection. Okay. So path points. So earlier in our lessons, we worked with shapes. Okay. But this time we're going to make this little selection into shapes so we have a little more control over this sort of like kind of atomic level of each individual point of what's happening here. Okay, so it's not doing like that great of a job, okay, but it's doing okay. But if you really zoom in, okay, there's like kind of problems here. So we're gonna wanna manipulate this selection to be as good as it could possibly be. All right, so how do I do that? We're gonna bring up our paths layer, or excuse me, our paths panel to be able to do that. If yours is not up, just go over to Window, bring up paths, and then there you have it. Now, right now, there's no paths. What we're going to do is we're going to convert this selection to paths. You'll notice that there's an option right here. Move your mouse over. It says, make work path from selection. It's weird. What does that mean? So I click on that, and you're going to see, oh, interesting. Looks like a bunch of shapes all over Fido's body. Okay, so what I can do is I can actually manipulate it a lot easier than I could with my quick selection tool and everything. With my quick selection tool, now I'm going to go to my direct selection tool to then really get very, very precise with my individual selections. See that? Even added on some extra things. Maybe I don't need some of those. So we're going to learn some of our pen tool options to be able to manipulate those. You see some things it got, some things it didn't. So just notice what I'm doing here. I'm just using all the things that we learned about how we manipulate shapes now for an individual selection. And if you're not comfortable yet with the keyboard shortcut of the space bar, this is really the time to use it because we're zoomed in and we want to be able to move around here. This is our hand tool. It's a nice, quick, easy access to get to the hand tool. So I can click and drag, move this around and only get the stuff that I want. I'm going to really zoom in and say, oh, wow, I got a lot of extra stuff here. I don't need a lot of these little path points, so I might want to get rid of them. And guess what? I can go back over to my pen tool. And I'm going to say, delete anchor point, and then just get rid of it. Get rid of it, get rid of it, okay, and get rid of it. Okay, well, I got a lot of stuff here. Things are going a little crazy. No problem. I'm just going to just really minimize how many I have. See that? Now it's just a straight line. Then I can control it coming right back to what I want to work with. Okay, so again, just click, 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 get rid of it, get rid of it. What don't you want? Just trim in the fat. And then maybe I'm going to bring this in a little bit. Understand the difference between the round grabbers right there and the little anchor points right there. Remember, the little round grabbers are going to be the Bezier handles, and that's going to affect your curve a little bit. Okay, again, I don't need this, so just delete all your squares you don't need. Okay, and maybe bring this in. So I could be here all day doing this. Okay, I'm also going to get rid of these, hit the delete key. Don't need any of this stuff here, hit the delete key. Just marqueing over that using my direct selection tool. Okay, that's great. Now, okay, of course I can be here all day. You certainly don't want to watch me doing this, but just know how easy this is and how effective this is going to be. It's going to take you a little bit of time to get that level of perfection, but it's going to be absolutely worth it to make sure you don't get too much, not too little. The way that the quick selection tool allows you to do, it's somewhat limited. So this is going to really give you that granular level of selection. You see that I got a little bit too much? Great. Bring that in, okay? And then bring this out. Okay, look at that. It missed an entire segment there. Because I'm now at like 230%, I can now really, really get what I want. In the next exercise, I'm going to show you how we can work with all this hair. Let's not worry about that for right now. And let's just say we are very satisfied with what we've done. And what we're going to do is now we're going to convert it back to a selection. So earlier we were at the paths panel and we clicked on this. Now we can't because we're currently in the path. So we kind of do its counterpart here, which is load path as selection. It's kind of the opposite of what we just did. I click on that and it's going to take the new and improved path and make that back into our little marching ants for selection. Okay, and then you kind of click on this gray area so you don't see the path part anymore. Okay, and then that's going to be a lot better for me to work with to do the thing that I ultimately want to do, which is to create something like this. And I'm going to be creating an adjustment layer of just that selection. So it says, hey, listen, make everything black and white except for Fido over here. Okay, and it's going to be nice and easy to be able to do that when I have a nice little selection for me to work with. Okay, so we're going to be doing in the next exercise kind of part 2 of this, how this works, but then using our smart radius. So if you want to practice doing what we've done, but what I'm going to do is actually save this selection. I recommend you doing that as well by going up to select, and then you can save the selection down here, and then just call this dog selection. So that way you can always come back to it if you need to. Click OK, and now that's going to be there. Now, if I accidentally deselect, I can always go back to select, load selection, and then there's my dog selection, and it comes right back. All right, so just take a few minutes, take a break here, pause the video, and then practice using your paths panel, and then also you're working with the combination of your direct selection tool, and then also your deleting anchor points, right, to be able to delete some of those anchor points that come in that you don't necessarily need. Okay, and then convert it back to our selection, and then save your selection, and then we'll come right back and we're going to work with the Smart Radius tool. Okay, so let's continue on with our discussion on advanced selection. And this is going to be with selecting hair and then going into our select and mask set of options here. So if you click on select way up on top, you're going to see here is the select and mask options. And that's going to get you a little bit deeper in terms of the types of things that you can select, how you want to select them, where you can go a little bit deeper with smoothing your selection, feathering out your selection, some shifting of your edge. Okay, lots and lots of options here. So the way I'm viewing this right now is very much like how the object looks, but I want to be able to isolate the object from its background. So if you look over here in the upper right is the view option. What I want to do is actually make it so I can either look at my marching ants from how I started, I can go to my onion skin, right? So I can kind of see a little bit of the background, but mostly the foreground, so I can see like, okay, how much of an edge is really happening here? Maybe you want to check out just doing it on black, not black, of course, so you can actually adjust the opacity on that. So totally up to you. Everybody's got a little bit of a different preference. Now, let's just play around with some of the basic tools. Maybe just one or two things is going to do it for us. So notice how the edge of his hair, right? It's not super kind of like natural. So let's just see what we can do to play around with that. And then notice here is this option under edge detection and radius, and also the smart radius options. So let's just go ahead and click on smart radius. And I want you to kind of keep an eye on the edge of his fur as I do that. I click on that, and then I'm going to bring up the radius, just slow and steady. Notice what it looks like now. Let's bring it back to what it looked like before. Bring it up again, even more so. Okay, you see that? Doing a pretty good job, right, of edge detection, right? It's getting it. Now, you'll also notice that there's some other really helpful options, including refine hair, and then also just some basic refinement of the edges if you need to do that. Okay, so mine's actually looking pretty good up until this point. So do I want to mess with it? Maybe, maybe not. But I'll just kind of give you a little preview of what we can do. If I click on that now, notice how that refine hair, it went a little bit crazy, right? I don't want to do that. It kind of like overdid it. Again, watch as I have to do that. Oh, okay, you know what? didn't need to do that because Photoshop sort of misinterpreted things. But I could also come over to here and I could say refine the edges, right? If it's not coming in how I want it to, let's just bring in a little more kind of a wisp. I can do that, right? I can bring those things in or take them away. Notice that the size of the brush will also kind of help me out with the strength of that. But it's really actually done a pretty great job for me. So I'm not going to change this at all. I love how this is, but just know what your options are and you're good to go. And it's done a nice job. So I'm going to click OK. And remember, my goal is to get it to look like this. How do we do that? We're going to use an adjustment layer. And I want to make sure that the actual selection is going to be good for something like this. Okay, so let's now go ahead and choose our adjustment layer to apply this. Now that I have your attention, let's talk about masking. This guy wants to be more ferocious. So some of you may remember from our last class for the intro to Photoshop, we made this guy into a lion, or part lion, part dog, or part dog, part lion. And we did that using masking. Okay, masking is an incredible tool that you can use to replace having to erase something, because remember that masking is not permanent, where erasing something is permanent. So you can always bring it back. And recall that there are two elements. There is black and there is white, and we will apply it using a brush tool and then sometimes using now the gradient tool. Okay, but essentially we want to understand that we have black and white color to work with. Now occasionally you're going to have gray that enters into the mix because black and white also consist of gray. Okay, so that's going to make it reveal slightly. So you're going to get a nice little surprise when you work with those. Okay, so with gray, with gradients. Okay, and also maybe modifying your brush somewhat. So let's do a little review on how we can do some basic masking. And you will see not only is this going to help you for what I just talked about as far as replacing the erase option, but it's going to help you when you do adjustment layers to be able to control how much of that adjustment layer you're going to show. And also when you're working with filters, okay? Some of the filter you want to show, let's say if you want to do a blur filter or a black and white filter, certain parts you don't want to be black and white. So you can go ahead and mask that out. All right, so white is going to conceal where black is going to reveal. Now think about with masking, I'm going to say this again in a little bit, but I want you to think about masking as a blindfold that then gets put onto an image. But then if we poke a hole in it, it becomes a mask. That's really what we're talking about here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and place in the image that we want to mask with this little puppy here. All right, and earlier, if you recall, I made a keyboard shortcut for placing. All right, how did I do that? Anybody remember? You go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts. You can see I can place by going to File, and then where was that again? Place Embedded, right? So if you recall this, I made a keyboard shortcut to be able to do that. Maybe you did that as well. So I'm going to use that because I love that, and it takes way too long to do everything else and remember it. So I'm just going to do Control-Shift-P. That places it in there. Wonderful. Bring in my little lion's face. Okay, that's amazing. And now also see that when I bring it in, not great that I have these little frames here. I don't want that. So I'm going to do Shift and Alt, or Option if you're on the Mac, and then click and drag from the corners, and just notice how it grows out from the center. Okay, perfect, just like that. All right, and then I'm going to commit to it. Wonderful. And I'm good to go. Now let's apply our mask. So how do we apply a mask? Very simply, we're going to go right to the layer that we want to work with, right? We're going to work with the lion's face, and then I'm going to apply a mask onto that layer. So very simply, let's click on the mask, and then there's my blindfold. See that? So it's still concealed. I want to be able to reveal by just going right into there to be able to do that. And remember, it's black and white using my brush. So I'm going to go to my brush tool or just hit the B key and just kind of check all my mirrors and everything like that, making sure everything's okay. I'm going to look at my opacity to be 100%. I'm going to make sure that my hardness is down to 0. okay, because that's going to make it so it's a little bit more sort of gradual, right? So it's not a very sort of abrupt little shift from whatever is going to be concealed and revealed. But that's entirely up to you. You can change all these things if you want to. So I'm also going to switch between black and white. I'm going to give you a nice little shortcut. See this little arrow right there, this little kind of button hook? It even tells you switch foreground and background colors. And then, oh, there's an X right there. What happens when I hit X? Oh, that's kind of neat. And for some of you, this might not actually be the colors you want it to be, right? Let's just kind of choose like this kind of color there. And like, oh, that's not what I want. If you hit the D key, as in default, right, that switches back. Or you can also hit this guy right here. And if you move your mouse over it will tell you that it is D for the keyboard shortcut. Okay, well, let's have some fun making some sweet little doggy a little more ferocious. So, bam, I have my brush here. I have my two colors that need to be switched now so I can then reveal. And I'm just going to simply click and drag to reveal. Oh, look at that. There he is. Okay, now I have a no-eyed little lion there with a weird looking face. Okay, but if I decide to change my mind, it's like, oh, that didn't go well at all, or like I just kind of hit the wrong spot, something like that. Oops, no problem. I can just switch right back to white, and I just hit the X key again on my keyboard to be able to do that. And I can just bring that back. I can bring back the dog, bring back everything. Excuse me, bring back the lion in this case. All right, so no problem there. But let's just go for it. I'm just going to hit the X key again, so I can then just smooth out just the middle part of the lion. Doesn't have to be perfect, because remember, none of this is destructive. I can always bring that back if I need to. All right, so I'm just going to do my best. Then I'm going to come over here to my background layer. I'm going to unlock it, and so I'm able to move it. I'm going to hit the V key on my keyboard to get to the move option, or you can always just hit the move tool here. I'm just going to nudge it with my arrow keys. So then I can just say, okay, great. Ooh, that's starting to look pretty cool, pretty ferocious. Very nice. Okay, and maybe I want to finesse this a little bit. So I'm going to go back to my mask, go back to my brush, and then what might I want to do? Like, oh, no, that's a little bit too much. So I hit the X key. Actually kind of want to do the opposite. Just make it so like the dog's face is really blending in nicely with the mane. See that? So it's like it's one item here, one unit. So it's really sort of his face is growing right out of the mane, her mane. Okay, very good. All right, great. So I love that. Now, let's say I want to just kind of tinker with this a little bit. I can very easily say, listen, you know what? I'd rather have the dog have the lion's eyes and do something a little more interesting. So super easy. Let's go ahead and just click, and wow, dramatically different. Just think about how you can do this, right? Like maybe you're bringing in somebody's face on top of somebody else's face. Maybe you're doing a logo onto a shirt. Maybe you just want to just put yourself inside of, you know, a dreamy landscape, something like that. You can very, very easily do that just by poking a hole through whatever you're in to then bring it into whatever's underneath it, okay? Let's try doing the opposite. Let's go ahead and just bring back the sweet eyes, but then let's bring in the lion. So we're just going to have a sweet little sad lion instead now. Kind of like that. Okay, and I'm going to just make that so it's just blending in nicely, and then leave it at that. That's the pet that you want to take home with you, and he's also going to protect you and cuddle with you. Okay, very good. So that is just the basics of masking. Now let's talk about gradient masking. All right, so let's just bring up an image. I'm going to bring up this door knocker. And then I'm going to place another image on top of it. So I'm going to again do my Control-Shift-P. All right, and I'm going to bring in this incense. And now they're right on top of each other. I'm going to unlock this and bring my door knocker on top of my incense layer. Now, let's see what I'm going to do here. I'm going to do another type of masking. So I'm going to apply a mask here. But this time, what I'm going to do is use the gradient mask. Okay, so gradients, just by definition, go from one color to the other, and then Photoshop kind of fills in that color of everything in between, right? So if I'm going to go from black to white, it's going to go from black to gray to white. All right, now, earlier we talked about black and white as far as being masks. So I need to also incorporate that same set of rules for my gradient that I'm going to apply to a mask. Okay, if that doesn't make sense, let me demonstrate for you. What do I need to do? I need to find something over here. It may not be showing up here, but I need to find my gradient tool. Now, if yours is not showing, it might be hidden underneath the paint bucket tool. Okay, so yours may look like that. Simply right click on it, choose gradient. Okay, wonderful, that's great. And now you'll notice that I have white going to black in this case. If yours is not there, you can always just click on it and then go to basic, and then you can choose it right there. Most of the time it will be there unless you've done something different recently. All right, and then also notice I have different types of gradients. Typically you're going to be linear gradient, or you might even be doing a radial gradient, depending on the effect that you want to create. All right, and I'll show you maybe both of those. So let's now do something. I have no idea what. So let's just learn about how the gradient tool works. So if you click and drag going from one corner to the other, you're going to be applying this white to black in that direction and in that distance. So watch what happens now if I click and drag. See what I'm doing? I'm just simply clicking and dragging. I let go. And now, just like that, I've got white to gray to black. And if we take a look down here, you will see exactly what I just did. Okay, earlier we were working with the brush where we were just like dragging, dragging, dragging. Here we have a nice subtle kind of reveal that we didn't have before. And like, maybe you're done. Like, this is great. But I'm not done. I'm not actually very satisfied with this because maybe I want to apply my gradient in a slightly different way. Let's just go to here and let's just see what that does. Oh, that's kind of neat. Let's try this way. What's that going to do? Come over to here. Just depending on where you begin, where you end, how far you go. Maybe you're going to start off the canvas. Okay, pretty neat. You see that? Okay, cool. What am I looking for? I kind of like that. That's kind of cool. So you can really experiment with this. You don't have to undo. You just keep going over and over and over again. Let's just see maybe quickly what the radial gradient does. I do that, and then, oh, I have that kind of effect. Or maybe I go the opposite direction, or maybe I was going to do it right on top of the knocker. Oh, that's kind of cool. I sort of like that maybe the best so far because the knocker is actually the most in focus, but it still brings everything else in line there. Okay, so kind of nice, but just remember where you begin, where you end, and how far you go. That is going to determine what your gradient is going to look like. So if we look at it this time, we'll see over here, it's now got a gradient going from white to gray to black. All right. Now, this could be a poster you're creating. Sure, why not? So this is maybe a poster for the country of Bhutan. Okay, and Bhutan is also very radical, according to this font here. Okay, so, all right, excellent. And there you go. And now you've got a nice little poster. And then maybe I would bring down the opacity a little bit on this. You know, maybe you'd add on a little shadow. Maybe you just do all kinds of cool things to this. Maybe you're even thinking about doing blending modes. Who knows, right? Just play around with it. Okay, that's kind of fun. We learned about blending modes before, and we'll see what we could do here. Some of these work better than others. Maybe with a different color it might work. Just play around with all this, okay? That's kind of neat. All right, kind of subtle. Just bring this up a little bit. Excellent. So very good. We'll leave it at that. Excellent. Please pause the video. Practice on your own. Lots to enjoy here. And just know that everything we're doing here is going to gear you up for other practices with masking, whether it's just going to be replacing erasing, or it's going to be something creative, kind of like this, working with gradient mask. But then it could be something even more creative and more controller oriented, like working with adjustment layers. If you're working with black and white and you don't want to see all the black and white, you want to make color shine through, you can absolutely do that. Okay. Or you're working with filters. You only want to have certain part of the filter to show. You want one part blurry, another part not blurry, another part rippled, another part not rippled. Okay. That kind of thing. So it's going to give you that kind of control to either conceal or reveal. All right, so go ahead and practice that, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Okay, now let's talk about filters. We're moving on to this discussion on filters, and Photoshop has lots and lots of them. If you want a review on the basics of filters, you can go check out our intro video as well. But let me just give you a little bit of foundational information about where to find filters. We can go up to here, we can find our filters, lots of options there. So when I click on that, lots of options here and like some flyout menus as well. But what I want to say, and this is very important, that virtually every time you create a filter, what I'm going to recommend you do is you make your layer into a smart object, also known as a smart filter, but essentially do the same thing. So I can say filter and then convert to smart filter, or I can just right click and just say convert to smart object. They're essentially the same thing. And what that's going to allow us to do is have some kind of protection and sort of like modularity, if you will, around our filters if we want to. So you'll see how this works. So let me just go ahead and do like a very simple filter here. I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to introduce you to this great section here called render. And there's lots of options I can do on this. I'm going to go ahead and just say a lens flare. And you will see that there's this cool little lens flare that's happening there. Okay, kind of cool. Let me even get a little bit brighter than that so we can really see it. And you'll notice how it kind of goes up into the sky, goes kind of all over the place, right? So it's kind of neat. You'll also notice how you can change certain things. Okay, what's the effect you're looking for? Oh, that's kind of neat. The movie effect. All right, so whatever you want. So I'm just going to choose maybe this first one because I like these little circles coming out there. And I'm going to keep with this level of brightness so you can see what I can do because it's a little bit too bright for me. I click OK, and you will notice there's my lens flare. It looks pretty cool, has a nice little effect. And you'll see now that I currently have this little smart filter mask. Earlier, we've talked about masks already, and we've seen them in kind of a different context, right? Where we just saw plain old masks, but now we have masks on a filter. And remember about the masking, it's either a blindfold or it's a mask. And then this is now concealing what's inside here, but I want to actually reveal what's inside there. So what does that look like? I'm going to click right on top of that mask. And remember, with masks, what are we talking about here? We are talking about black or white or possibly gray, and you're going to use the brush tool to apply that. Okay, so let's just go ahead and see what that's going to look like. Meaning I don't want to see so much of that lens flare. I love this, but I want this to be a little bit more faded inside of here. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go over to my brush tool as promised, or hit the B key. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint black. Okay, because remember earlier how we work with our mask and we're able to make our blindfold into a mask. But instead of just painting right through it, I'm going to bring down my opacity a little bit to see if I can just very subtly kind of poke a hole right into that section there. So I'm just going to go ahead and click. And you can see, oh, that's pretty neat. Maybe it's a little bit too much. So let me go ahead and bring that. Yeah, maybe that's still a little bit too much. So let's see. Let's actually bring it to much lower, in fact. Okay, there we go. That was the ticket. So not bad. Okay, so I'm able to, let me just kind of go a little very subtle thing like that. Maybe like that, like that, like that. Kind of a spice to taste situation. It's just kind of bring in the color of the bricks, the color of the building. Yep, there you go. I like that. Notice it's still got the ring there. It's still got that there. And if you look at the original, that's what it looked like before. Now we have this aspect on there. So if you'll notice that this whole thing around there is kind of like filtering over everything. So if you don't want some of that, you can easily take care of that by simply clicking on the mask. I'm just going to make this nice and big. So it's just like a little kind of powder all around there, right? Just a little bit of, get rid of that, just so it's kind of subtle. Again, I'm at 15%, maybe bring that up a little bit more, make it a little more powerful. Let's look at the before and the after. Okay, so this is just one of many types of filters I'm going to show you, but I want you to notice that we can very easily control what our filter is going to be and to what degree by using our masks. Okay. Now you'll also notice that sometimes we're going to have these extra options to be able to control it and also to turn it on and off again. Okay. You'll see that there as well. Okay. So we're going to continue on with some other filters in just a little bit, but pause for a minute, go ahead and practice this very little bit here. And again, don't forget to apply your smart object to your main layer before you apply a filter. All right, go ahead and try that, and we'll be back in the next exercise. Now, continuing on with our discussion on the rendering filter, let's just discuss some other ones that are kind of filters, but not really filters. They just render something for you. So let's look at the frame filter, where it's going to kind of generate kind of a creative set of frames for us with lots and lots of different options. Now, I want to put a frame over this picture, but I do not want to put it on the picture itself. So a nice little tip is to, guess what? Create a new blank layer right on top of it. And that's where my frame is going to go. It's going to give me all the control so it does not get stuck to the image itself. So let me go over here to filter. I'm going to say render. I'll say picture frame. And when I get here, you're going to see here's a little preview of maybe the last one that I chose. And there's lots and lots of options here. You can see here is what frame you want and all the colors, the margins, right? All these settings here. And these are going to be very much spiced to taste. So you can just kind of pick and choose from all of these, go to town with them. So let's just go to romance, see how much that changes. Okay, let's go to eyelash. Very intriguing. Okay, what are those going to be? And I can guarantee you they're going to look a lot better than this rendering is. So just be patient with it. So I'm going to come back to bush. And then I can change all these things here. Vine color, you can't really see the vine, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. Your margin, I can really play around with that if I want to, but because it's going to be its own separate layer, it doesn't really matter because I can then manipulate that. That's what's so cool about it. The size, we'll be able to see what the size is going to do, right? Pretty much what you think it's going to do. Makes the whole thing just grow kind of out from the center. My arrangement, right? That just kind of randomizes things a little bit. Let's just kind of go a little crazy. See what that does. Kind of a little bushier, a little more symmetrical, right? Okay, so interesting. All right, and then we also have our flowers and our leaves, and you just really just experiment with those. But I really want you to see what our options are going to be. So the flowers should be there in the front, and the leaves are going to be there in the back. Notice there's the color of them. All right, so let's just say I want to do something kind of lavendery. All right, that's kind of nice. You'll see that these guys get nice and lavendery. Okay, pretty cool. And I can change the size of that if I like to as well. So that'll make those grow. All right, and then also here's my leaf color. I'll just keep that just like that for the sake of this exercise. Keep these exactly as they are. And I'll go over here to advanced, and you can just really play around with these, like my angle and then the fade. My experience doesn't really do a ton, but you'll see this invert is kind of interesting. What do you want it to do, right? See how it kind of like inverts it, a little more kind of like hard angle versus a little bit more of a soft edge. Like how framey do you want it to be? Okay, I'm just going to actually uncheck that. And now I'm ready to go. I'm going to click OK, and let's just see what it does. And remember, I'm on a new layer all by itself, so it is not on the pixels themselves, and I can move this around independently. It's really cool. And guess what? I can resize this independently. I can even decide to, I wouldn't delete, I would mask out some of this in case I change my mind, right? We've been talking about mask. So maybe I want to do that. Maybe I want to bring down the opacity a little bit. And you see, I can totally control all that. And then maybe some of you are thinking, well, you know what? I want to change the whole color. So I could actually come back to my filter and make some changes to it. If you want to do that, go back and then go back to your picture frame. But also, guess what? Because it's its own layer, maybe you want to go even further and go to effects. And then you just want to play around with the color overlay. Maybe you want to do a whole completely different look on this, right, on top of what we've already got. So if we go to, like, let's say color overlay, notice how that changes just like that. And let's just go to red, but then I bring this down a little bit. I can play around with the colors in that way. And then guess what? Here's blend modes all over again. If you've been following along so far, you've heard us talk about blend modes quite a bit. So let's just see different kind of things now we can do. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Color burn with that. How could I have gotten that otherwise? Now I'm able to really get some pretty dramatic, very creative effects that I wasn't able to get otherwise. So I click on that and like, boy, am I happy. That is so cool at the end of it all. Okay, and again, I can get rid of this if I want to, and I can do so much with it because it's on its own layer. Okay, so go ahead and practice that. When we come back, we're going to do one more rendering exercise, and that's going to be with creating trees. Okay, so let's talk about rendering trees. And this is a pretty extraordinary thing, again, how Photoshop just gives you a nice little gift. I have a blank transparent layer ready to now render some trees. So I go over here to Filter. I'm going to say Render. I'm going to say Tree. Fantastic, that's great. And you will see that I have a number of different options here to choose from to create a tree. And this is a pretty nice looking tree. And I have a whole bunch of other ones here. Very, very high quality, just depending on what you're looking for. Let's look at the cherry blossoms. Ooh, that's kind of nice. All right, let's go back to an oak, see what that can do. All right, just depending, maybe you're creating a scene. Maybe you are, you're in charge of creating like the architecture, the design for a building, something like that. And your job is just to bring in some trees. You can find some pretty high quality trees and also create multiple trees. And maybe you just want to know what some trees are like, right? What do they look like? Now you're looking to understand, you can spot them when you see them. All right, and you'll see a lot of these again are sort of spiced to taste, right? So it's like the light direction, right? Just kind of changes that angle of where the light's coming from. So you can kind of keep things consistent when you are rendering. You kind of want to give that realism. So just make sure you're doing that. Leave them out. It's great. Size, branch height, right? You just really want to play around with these, okay? And then you can see the arrangement. That's going to just kind of throw out some random things there. You just try it out however you like. Again, very much spice to taste. Now, if we go over here to advanced, I think there's kind of a nice thing where you can custom color the leaves. So let's say it's a different time of the year and you want it to be this kind of like, auburn color, if you will, right? You can go ahead and choose that, click OK, and like, oh, that is very obviously a different time of the year. And you can certainly do the same thing for all of these as well. All right, so let's just go ahead and click OK. And let's see the beauty that has now been created for us. And look how awesome that is. Look how high quality this is. So if you wanted to have like a whole forest of these, you can go ahead and just, resize this. It's going to be its own layer. Okay, and guess what? I can then hold down the Alt Option key and then make a different one like that. Maybe it's a little bit smaller. Maybe I'm going to go to, let's just say, Edit, Transform, and then let me just flip this. So it looks like slightly different. Okay, all right, that's kind of neat. And then maybe I'm going to just do that. Same thing. Maybe you're going to add on a little drop shadow. You can do all kinds of different things there. And then maybe you're even going to go a step further, like I showed you with this other one, is that you're going to put in maybe a little bit of a different effect on here for a little color overlay, for something different, and then playing around with the blend modes. And then finally, you're done with your aspens. Let's just add on another tree. How easy is that? So go ahead and create another layer. Go over here to Filter. Let's say Render. And then just for fun, let's just bring in one more tree, creating our new little world here. Let's just bring in a spruce tree, okay? We're going to be in another part of the country that I'm in. This is going to be up in the mountains, okay? So love this, but maybe I don't need it to be quite so much the same color. So let's make that kind of a dark green. See what that's going to do, okay? But maybe I can play around with changing the color of my branch there, make that a little bit darker. Okay, great, love that, looking pretty good. And again, you can play around with some of these things as well. And all these really do add a little bit of flavor to it. You can see here, just play around with it until you get what you like. Does that add to your realism? Add more and more, or take away. Maybe less is more for you, but just know that you do have these options. And again, when you're finished with it, you will have complete ownership over this, because then it's going to be on its own layer. And then you can bring this down. You can do whatever you want to it. Okay, bring down the lightness of it, bring down the opacity of it. Okay, put on a color overlay, do all kinds of great things to it, even maybe playing around with some of our levels and our curves and any of these other things, the vibrancy. Okay, now let's just make this kind of the tallest guy in the bunch. He's in the background. We're over here. And then, again, really just kind of creating your world accordingly. All right, so enjoy, play around with that. Hopefully you have some good usage for that, some good utility. And we'll come back in the next exercise where we're going to continue on with our discussion on filters. We have a few more to go with filters that are not going to be rendering. They're going to be a little more creative, a little more nuanced. So come back and we'll see you in a bit. So pause your video and practice away. Now, continuing on with our discussion on filters, we're going to be going to something a little more creative, a little more nuanced, and that is something called the vanishing point. Now, we have this building here that has all these angles and everything, and I want to actually put something on here that conforms to the angle itself. Okay, so I'm going to be putting on this little logo right there. Okay, a little bit of branding. You can see there it is. Fine. I want that to look very smooth, and I want it to fit in perfectly with that angle. So if I were to copy and paste that, and then I were to transform it and all that stuff, it's going to look very sloppy. I don't want to do that. Okay, so there's a few things I need to do before I apply this filter. Is number one, I want to make 2 layers. Okay, so if you haven't done this before, I'm just going to go ahead and just hold down the Alt or Option key, and that duplicates it. Super easy. Come back to this top layer, and then this is going to be what I'm going to copy and paste into there. So essentially, this is the item that needs to go into the vanishing point filter. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to highlight everything, which is going to be Command or Control A. So you're actually selecting everything. I know it's kind of weird. And then you're going to copy it, Command or Control C. Then come back over here. Now let's go ahead and click on Filter. Go to Vanishing Point. Okay, if you see anything like this, just say OK. And now you may actually see something living here from before. I'm just going to delete that, just make it go away. And now, very simply, I'm going to create a similar grid as what you saw in terms of where I want it to live and what the vanishing point's going to be. Because notice it's not like a straight angle, and Photoshop needs to know where's it going to go. So I'm just going to click 4 times. This is where it's going to begin. It's going to go to here. It's going to go to here. It's going to go to, yeah, right about there. Keep it on the floor. And just note, if you don't do a good job, you can always bring it in if you want to, this way, that way. You can absolutely play around with that a little bit more up here if you want to tuck that in, for sure. Now, I'm going to paste. So I paste, and I'm going to go over to here to my free transform tool, believe it or not, and I can now resize this, move it around, do whatever I want to it. So let me just drag this in to my little box here. And just like that, I now have it. And notice how it just like conformed perfectly to the same angle as my grid. It's the coolest thing. Let me bring that in a little bit. And you can see, nice, not too shabby. All right, now I think I'm pretty much good to go, right? I love this. You can see the magic of what this is done. You'll want to practice this, right? But this is great. Love this. Let me click OK. And you can see that's good. Not great. It's not very convincing, but it does do it along the sides there. And maybe I'm happy with this. But I really kind of want to make it look a little bit more sort of natural that's on there. And there's a few things that I can do. We talked about blending modes earlier. We're going to see blending modes in action in this case as well. So if I click on this top layer, remember blending modes are going to blend into whatever's underneath here or whatever it is, right? So it needs to understand that like this white, really, it doesn't belong there, right? It's not meant to be there. Don't care about that. So guess what? I can do any one of these blending modes and experiment to see, well, which is going to be the best one. Is it dissolve? I didn't do anything. What about this one? Ooh, darken. All right, I'll keep that in mind. What else? No. Darken's still the winner. What's this one? Darker color. Okay, we have a pattern here of what it can do. So it's taking that white and you say just darken that, right, to whatever the background is. The background essentially wins in this case. So I love this, or maybe it's just darken, right? Either one's going to work for me. Now I could bring down the opacity as well. So then it really kind of brings in some of the paint here. So it does start to look a little more natural, maybe a little more faded. And then the last thing I'm going to do is make it so these windows are not, in fact, part of the paint, right? So it's like, oh, that actually looks cool, but it doesn't look very realistic, okay? So what I can do is apply a mask to it and then just poke a hole right through the mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the polygon lasso tool just by going to here and then just going from one corner to the other, to the other, to the other. Essentially, this is what I want to get rid of. And then guess what? When I draw black into that, as we know about mask, it's only going to draw inside of that box. So you don't have to worry about being so perfect because it's only going to do it within that. Okay, that's pretty cool. Maybe I actually want to go a step further, but see, it actually looks kind of neat because it does conform to the edges here. All right, and let's do it one more time. Let's do it for this part of the window. Bam, bam. Make sure you're on your mask, go to your brush, and then poke that out. And let's just zoom out a little bit. And that looks pretty slick, pretty cool using the, guess what? Vanishing point filter. So really cool stuff. Experiment with that and then combine it with our blend modes and then also combine it with your masking. So we're starting to see all of our tools come together, aren't we? Right? We're starting to kind of build a symphony, a chorus, right? So a whole sort of, litany of different things that we can work with just by knowing one tool and then combining it with a few other tools. We can be really powerful with all of our tools. Okay, so this is another filter. We're going to come back with another one in just the next lesson. So pause the video, practice this, and have fun. In this next series of videos, we're going to be working with this particular file so we can learn how do we use the polar coordinates and the zigzag and a few of the other distort filters, the distort filters. Now, this is going to be one of the things we're going to create. You can see this there. Pretty cool, pretty neat. But I want you to understand how we started from this. So if I'm going to click on this guy, and this is essentially where I started from. But even before that, I started from this top layer here that actually had a ton of other individual little shapes there. So I actually had to create this first and then merge them together as one big one. So if you right click on it, you can see here is the option to merge the group. And then I created this guy right here to be able to do that. Now, just so you understand, Photoshop gives you some nice tools to be able to work with when you are in fact creating things like that. And that is designed to give you a little more kind of perfection. And that is going to be the grid option. So you can see I have all these little grids here. Now I just drew out one shape and I colored it, and I drew out another shape, I colored it, and then I just cloned, and it wound up fitting perfectly in each of these individual grid lines. Okay, so you can see also I have the option to snap to the grid line. So that made it much, much easier to create something like this. So for the purpose of this exercise, I just made it easy for you so you have access and ready to go. So we're not going to use this top one. This is one of the things we're going to create, but we are going to be using this one right here to create it. So make sure those actually merge together as one big shape before you do that. So let me turn off my grid, okay? And I am ready to go. Now, again, remember the rule of thumb about before you make something into a filter to do what? We're going to make it into a smart object. So that way I can then tinker with it later on, come back to it, turn it off, do all kinds of things in case I change my mind. So let's play around with this polar coordinate. How do we make something like this? Pretty great. This is all set up, ready for me to go. I go to filter, I go over to here to distort, and you'll see there's this option to polar coordinates, right? Or to apply polar coordinates. So I click on that and you'll see, wow, there's my preview. Fantastic. Let me zoom in or out, right? Let me just go ahead and bring this in, bring it out, whatever you want to do. Okay, great. Now I can see the whole thing. I click OK, and just like that, you've created this really, really cool effect. And just note that I can turn it off, turn it back on again. Double click back on here, and now I can see it all over again. Can't really change it so much, but what you can do, okay, is you could apply potentially some blending modes on this. And we're going to be playing around with some blending modes in just a little bit and how that works. All right, so this is just one thing you may want to do. Now, I love this and I want to continue doing some more on this. So I'm going to go ahead and clone this, and selecting this same shape, I'm going to go back to filter. I'm going to choose distort. And this time, let's see what twirl does. Oh, that's kind of fun. Notice you can go this way. You can go that way. Wow, interesting. I can see, wow, I'm going to go all the way up to close to 500. I click OK. And got to blot this out to see it. There we go. Now I can see what I've done. Pretty neat. That's kind of interesting. Let me go ahead and clone this one more time. And let's just see another effect we can get. I'm going to blot this out. Come back to here. I'm going to apply another filter to this. Let's do distort. And I don't know. Do we do wave? Let's do wave. See what that does. Huh. Lots of stuff here. This will definitely be like a spice to taste thing here. Okay, see what that's going to do. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Bring that in there. Wow. Maybe that's all you want and you're good with that, but you can play around with all these things here. And I have a goal with all this because this doesn't need to be perfect necessarily, but you can really just, maybe you love this and this is where you're going with it. Okay, it's great. Maybe bring down the scale. That could be something maybe a little bit more kind of obvious in terms of what you're trying to create. But again, spice to taste, and remember where this actually started from. Okay, where did this start from? Okay, so I'm going to click OK. Just say I'm good with this. Click OK. And that's great. And I love this. All right, fantastic. Now let's see what we can do where we just start going a little bit more kind of crazy with this using, guess what? Our blend modes. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to put a blend mode on this particular one that I first created. Actually, let's do it on this one that I have here. Let's have this one, and let's have that one. I'm going to bring this guy up on top. Just tear this out so I can see the whole thing. That's better. And now let's just see what happens when I blend these together. So I'm going to say dissolve, not so much. Whoa, darken. Where did that come from? Oh my God. Okay, but oh my goodness. Whoa, lighten. What did that do? Whoa, that is so cool. All right, you know what? I love that. See what I did there with screen. Okay, screen is kind of a lightning blend mode. And by the way, for blend modes, there's in the courseware, there's a little description of blend modes. But now let's do another one. Whoa, I just added a blend mode to the layer that was below the other layer I just did it to. And then we'll just see, what does that do? Oh man, I can do so much with this. Holy cow. Now, just by virtue of the fact I created these three independent distort filters, I'm now able to create something very different. Okay, and then maybe for some of you, you're going to say, well, I also want another color here. Okay, so guess what? You can do a color overlay, right? Or maybe you're going to want to just make this independent, however you want to do that, where you maybe make that into a raster after the fact, all said and done. But let's just try color overlay for this one. Okay, and then let's just make that blue. You see what that does in terms of how it all comes together. Bring that up again one more time. Let's bring this up a tiny bit. Let's make that normal. Oh, okay. Interesting. Let's bring that down a tiny bit. Oh my God. So this is going to allow you to, number one, never get any sleep at all. Number two, just to be as creative as you want to be in a really, really interesting way. And the more you start to do these things, the more kind of predictability they will have, right? Looking at, I have my twirl, my polar coordinates. Okay. I have my wave. Okay. So you can see, wow, there's a lot that I can do. combining all these things here. Okay, and of course, if you'd like, you could just start painting through some of these filters. If you don't want to see them, you want to see what's inside of there, just by using black into the mask of the filter. Okay, so you have all the control in the world. If there's something underneath here, you want to make that pop out and then get rid of that filter, you can absolutely do that. And likewise, you can actually just put a mask on the item itself. So you can actually have more than one mask if you like. So if I wanted to kind of see what's inside through here, I go back to my mask, hit the brush tool, and then I can have something a little bit less kind of linear just by drawing inside of this. And see that? Ooh, that's kind of cool. It's kind of coming out concentrically. And if I change my mind, of course, or I make a mistake, oops, no big deal. Switch back to white and bring it back. All right, and now we've got a really, really cool effect. Practice this, okay? And make sure you use all the files that I've provided for you. And then I would also recommend doing a save as, so you have this originally, so you can come back to it anytime you want. All right, so have fun with this, practice it, pause the video, and we'll come back with another filter for you to work with. Now, in this exercise, we are going to learn how to create something like this. And this is known as a displacement map, but we're also combining a number of different other things like a pinch filter. We're also working with a number of different layer adjustments and a few other elements here. All right, working with opacity, etc. Now, this is a slightly complicated process. That's why I saved it towards the end. So you'll want to watch this again and again. Definitely take some notes on it. All right, so this is going to be a slightly sort of numerous set of things here. All right, so what we need to do first of all is to create what we call our displacement map based off of our initial image. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our first image, and we're going to duplicate this image by right-clicking on it, and then we're going to make a new image out of this, right? Sorry, a new document out of this image. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and type this out and just call this displacement map, right? That's it. Just calling it that. And then I click OK. And now this is now its own separate thing. Now, once I do that, I'm going to put a blur on this. Okay, that's part of my displacement map. So go over here to filter, go to blur, and very simply, we're going to say Gaussian blur, and you can make it anywhere between maybe 1 and 3, something like that, just so it's a little bit blurry. Okay, so it just kind of has like the semblance of it. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to make this black and white. Go over here to my little adjustment layer here, go to black and white, and then usually default settings should be fine. And then make sure to save this. So file, save, or just do whatever you want to do here. And then now that's saved, and you're going to save that for later on. So I'm going to close this now, and you're going to see where that's going to come into effect. Now, let's come back to our original image. And again, remember what our goal is here. We're going to go ahead and put something like this on her face, but we're going to make it look very kind of realistic. So how do we do that? I'm going to go to my image here that I have set up. You should have access to this as well. And this is now a smart object. Very important, this is a smart object. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this image that I have here by using my move tool over this tab, and then bring this back down over here and have that ready to go, and just kind of bring it in so it's kind of like over her face a little bit, and then maybe bring it in, just so it's kind of more or less the shape of her face. Of course, you can move this later on, but see, it's nice and centered there. Do whatever you got to do. Bring that in. Okay. Great. Now, what I'm going to do next, let's just go ahead and just center it that way. All right, and commit to that. And let's just bring down the opacity a smidge so we can kind of see what our sort of goal is going to be. Now let's apply our first filter on this. And remember, this is a smart object, so it's not going to be destructive. I'm going to go to filter, go to distort, and I'm going to say pinch, And the pinching basically implies that there's going to be like a little bit of her nose there. So we want to kind of have a little bit of a lump, how that's going to go. So I'm going to maybe bring mine down to like maybe -20 or so. Click OK. And you can see it's starting to kind of like swell up a little bit where her nose is. So it kind of like makes that kind of go up a little bit to where the bridge is. Maybe I want to change that to actually make that a little bit less so. So it's just slight like that. You know, not a ton, but it kind of creates the illusion that there's definitely some things happening here. Okay. Now, let's start working with this a little bit more. What else can we do after we pinch? Let's now see what we can do with our blending mode. So I click on this little drop down and let's just see what other things we can do to make this do what we want to do. Oh, it's starting to look a little better. See that? What about linear burn, darker color? Nah, not so much. Okay, see some other ones here. Overlay, not bad, kind of interesting. So you just kind of shop around until you find the one you like. So I'm just going to try color burn for now. And you see, that's actually pretty cool. Like just that in and of itself, I kind of like that. So you might just stop right here. And obviously I'm going to want to poke a hole through this and everything like that. But let's just see what we can do if we add on this displacement map to our layer here. Okay, so let's go over here to filter. We're going to go to distort, displace, and we're just going to choose these settings here. 5, 5, stretch to fit, and then repeat edge pixels. And then when we click OK, it's actually going to ask us for that first initial image that we created. Now that displacement map is designed to be sort of a mold for where it's going to kind of find the curves and all that kind of stuff to make this a little more maybe realistic, right? Totally up to you, right? You may not want it that way. You may decide that this is totally fine. I'm going to go over here to displacement map. And you see how things kind of like shifted a little bit? Kind of made it maybe a little bit more kind of curvy, and it kind of found her lips and everything like that based off of all those settings that we saw before. So let's just get it before, after. Okay, yeah, kind of like that. But let me just maybe warp this a tiny bit just so you can see what it does in case you need to do that. It kind of like asked me, hey, we're going to be turning off the pinch for just a split second in case you wanted to just do a little bit different something. Let me move this up a little bit off her face a little bit. Okay, commit to that. All right, coming together. Really like that. And now maybe what I'm going to do next is I'm going to, of course, get this out of her eyes. So I'm going to mask that. And I'm going to put a little bit of black through there so I can see her eyes coming through. Obviously, she's not going to have any paint in her eyes. So let's fix that. Maybe even over her lips. Let's actually see her lips coming through. She's not going to have paint there. Okay, and anything else, other place you don't want it to be there, you can absolutely get rid of it there. If it's too big, whatever it is. And then just for fun, let's add on maybe a vibrance adjustment layer. Maybe I'll bring that up a tiny bit, bring up saturation a little bit, maybe down, totally up to you, whatever your look is for. Bring that up a little bit, so a little more texture there. And coming together, pretty good. All right, and then maybe we'll play around with maybe some other different ones that you like. Different blending modes, just play around, see what the look is that you're looking for. All right, so keep that as is. And there you have it, displacement map. And this is used in so many different ways, okay? So you'll see that a lot of examples, you know, on buildings, on newspapers, on books, right? All kinds of different things, but these are the steps on how to do it primarily. All right, so practice this and you'll see that it's a lot simpler than you realize. All right, so pause the video, practice, and we'll see you in the next lesson. So next session is going to be around another filter that is essentially kind of a one-stop shop for so many things, from our color, our lighting, our healing, Right, so many different things. There's even some presets we can work with. And that's going to be the filter called the Camera Raw filter. So if we go over here to filter, you're going to see here is Camera Raw. So what I'm going to do before I apply this filter, as I am with many other filters, is I'm going to make this into a smart object, as I recommended before, because that way we can just turn it off, it's non-destructive, and then we can mask through it. So let's just see what our options are with this Camera Raw filter. I'm going to click on filter, go over to here to Camera Raw filter, and click on the option. It's going to bring us over to this. And we see we have a lot of options here. On the right hand side, we have all of these options, right, for basic, curve, detail, etc. So many other features down below. If you look at this for color mixer, color grading, right, effects, all kinds of stuff. Then we also have these little kind of subdivisions here on the right hand side for healing, for different ways of applying all these different effects and color improvements and lighting and all that good stuff here. So we'll be exploring some of these. But what we're going to do at first, before we go any further, is I just want you to see some of these presets that are going to be available for us in case maybe this is the main reason why you're here. So you'll see that there is color, creative, black and white, all these things here that you can just play around with on your own and just kind of see, do they work for you? And bam, you love this. So I click on that and we'll see as I move my mouse over it, pretty neat, pretty quickly, I'm getting some nice effects, and maybe this is all I really need to improve my photos. Okay, fantastic. What about creative? Let's see what these can do. And really just experiment, go shopping around. You can apply them, you can stack them on top of each other if you want to. Let's see what black and white does. Notice how there's several different kinds of black and white. Some a little more rich in contrast, a little sort of chrome oriented, a little more aged. Look at that. If you want to make make it look like a really old photo very quickly and easily, you can go right to Camera Raw and do that. So like I was saying, this is sort of a one-stop shop where we have a lot of the things that we can do in our adjustment layer and our filters, okay, and some other ways, with our effects and all this stuff we can do here. So I'll just kind of show you a couple more we can work with, and then we'll go into more sort of manual way of how we can use Camera Raw. So we can see curves. We've talked about curves in my intro class. Curves is basically looking at the curves of our different levels, right? We have different levels within each photo. We have our highlights, we have our midtones, we have our shadows, and we have lots of things in between for individual colors that they have their own curves, and we'll be able to manipulate them in a little bit, but these are going to allow us to then just kind of do things a little more automatically. All right, so really just kind of play around with these, like sharpening. Oh, that's kind of nice. All right, you can just see what kind of sharpening it could do. Light, medium, heavy. And you can see very subtle things there where the edges get a little bit sharper. And let's just check out vignetting. Ooh, that's kind of nice. You can see how there's a slight little vignette that's coming around the outside, just kind of like a little glossy little frame that sort of like frames the inside, almost kind of draws your eyes into it, creating maybe a little more of a ethereal look. Okay, so really come back and play with these. You'll see that there's a lot you can explore and really save some time. So maybe this is all you do when you're working in your Camera Raw filter and you're good to go and you're happy, right? And then you leave here feeling like, okay, I did something pretty good, pretty creative, pretty quality, and my photo looks amazing. Now let's go to some other elements where maybe you really want to kind of like do things a little more manually. You want to kind of cherry pick different parts of it. All right. So if you've ever worked in Lightroom before, this is very similar to Lightroom. And if you have not worked with Lightroom, you're going to see that you'll be able to work with Lightroom a lot better after this tutorial. So if we look over here on the right-hand side, we have this guy here. We have all these guys here. We're going to be exploring these to a certain degree a little bit deeper. So notice here is the edit tools. And we have, this is where we started, by the way. And you're going to see here we have basic, curve, details, all these things. Let's just play around and see what we can do with a handful of these. So if we go over here to basic, you'll see how I can work with my color temperature. Let's just go ahead and give this a little more of a cool color temperature. Notice how that does a whole cast over the whole thing. Okay, do I want that? Maybe, maybe not. So you'll just notice also when I move over and I decide I don't want that anymore, if you double click on the little stop, that takes you right back to 0. So that's kind of nice. I do that, and that just does a whole cast over the entire image. Double click to go back to 0. And the same thing here for exposure, highlights, shadows, right? What are we actually working with? Okay, if I'm only want to work with the shadows, you can see only the dark stuff gets affected with the light stuff, not so much. And maybe that does actually add to some things. Maybe you come back to this after you've done some black and white. You like it, but then you want to make that black and white contrast a little bit deeper, a little bit richer. You can come back into all of these and experiment. Let's go ahead and just bring up the saturation. You'll notice, ooh, that's pretty neat. Check it out. All my blues get bluer. All my greens get greener. My sky upstairs even gets a little bluer. Okay, that's kind of cool. Bring that back. We talked about curves earlier. You'll see here, again, my highlights, lights, dark shadows, all these things here. I can play around with all of these inside here, but with my curve itself, what I like to do is work with this guy, which is the targeted adjustment tool. So you'll notice here that's going to allow me to then target a particular part of it. So let's just say, for example, I only want to focus on the green grass. I can click on that, and then notice how, like, as I move my mouse around, the curve kind of goes all over the place. Where is it in the histogram here? Where does that color live? Is it the brightness? Like how the brightness goes way up. Let's go to this dark area here. It goes way down. You see, so it is kind of instructive in terms of what it's going to do. All right, so let me just go ahead and just bring this up a little bit and notice how it's only affecting certain parts of it, but it is affecting what I want to affect. So it's everything that's kind of in that same spectrum on the histogram, including some of the gray and some of the sky and everything like that. Okay, just notice how I can go left and right, up and down, different degrees of my color, different degrees of my lighting. I'm just going to go and bring that back, double click it. And let's maybe just come over here to my effects. You'll see that maybe you want to add some grain. Maybe you're making like kind of an old photo, if you will. Vignetting, sometimes you can see, bam, that works kind of nicely. All right, that's great. How much is that doing for me? Okay, all right, great. So do you want to go dark? Do you want to go this way? So earlier we saw our vignetting where it was adding something on for me automatically. Here, I can do it a little more manually. Okay, so wow, that's kind of nice, and maybe I love this. So let's bring that back, bring that back. So let's see other things that we could possibly do. And I'm going to skip over this spot removal one. Let me just zoom in here so you can see exactly what I'm talking about here. So you're going to see here is my spot removal. I'm going to zoom out for right now. We're going to come back to that in a bit. But let me just show you this adjustment brush. Okay, so you'll notice here how I have all these elements here that I can now just brush directly onto the canvas. So I might want to get things set up a little bit to make it so it's going to do what I want to do. So you kind of want to check your mirrors, so to speak, before you go into this, right? So you can see here's my temperature, my tint, my exposure, you know, and then you'll also notice that I also have my saturation over here. So let me bring that. So it's going to be maybe mid-range or maybe a little bit higher before I actually start executing what I want to do. So let me just try to now kind of paint in over here. Not a whole lot happens, but let me just go a little bit more blue. And let me just bring up my saturation a little bit. And you can see I'm now just starting to paint in a nice blue sky. See that? And I'm also painting in a little bit of a green tree. I don't want that. So let me just zoom in a little bit. I'm going to come in here, zoom in. I'm going to hold down my space bar to come in there. Actually, maybe I do like that green tree now that I think about it. But if I didn't, I can just hold down the Alt key and get rid of that. Okay, but you want to be very focused on what you're going to do, right? So you notice how I did that, and then it just kind of took me right back to what I wanted. You probably more likely want to just brush in what you want at that point, rather than kind of overriding it with having nothing on there. So you'd want to actually control what the temperature is going to be and what your saturation is going to be, etc., with all these other things here. Okay, so if I were to bring this now back, okay, I can then just zap that out if I like. All right. Okay, but I'm going to undo, bring that back, come back to 100%, take a look at our beautiful sky. Not too bad. It's a good start. So you'll notice I can also do the same thing with my car. So I can just make that a little more of the color that I want it to be. See that? I'm in control now. I'm not letting the whole program take control over it. Okay? So pretty nice. It's going to allow me to really control which parts that I want to work with independently rather than working with this whole editing toolbar that does the entire thing. When I use my brush tool, it's going to allow me to be very specific and very kind of surgical about what I want to work with. Okay, so really, really cool. Now you'll notice that I have this little balloon that popped up here. Okay, that is all related to these individual parts that I can create, that I can have control over, individual parts to say, listen, this is going to be separate from this is going to be separate from this is going to be separated from that. So if I were now to just simply click down here, I'm now going to get a new balloon, if you will, and then whatever is activated at that point will then get affected separate from the rest. Okay, so notice how that is getting a little bit greener, temperature, and let's bring up my saturation so we can see, kind of loses a little bit of saturation, gets a little saturation, but nothing else gets affected, okay, because this part is separate from this, to separate from this, separate from this, okay? So I only have two parts here, and again, if I wanted to go directly on my car, I can focus on that. If I want to go directly on my tree, I could then say, hey, let's create a new adjustment layer, and then bam, that's now separate. So each of these things can be all independent of each other as you're applying all of these individual effects on color and light, shadows, levels, all this good stuff here. Okay, so really, really neat. And if you're done with one of them, just simply click on it, hit the delete key, and it goes away, right? So no more power for that. Now, sometimes you might want to work with a slightly different style, which is this graduated filter, okay? And that's actually pretty good for skies. We're not going to do it here, but you're going to see here, this is going to give us an option to actually just say, hey, listen, I want whatever I'm going to do to affect from here to here as almost like a gradient, if you will. So let me just bring this up a little bit. And then here's my saturation. It's super, super high. And now if I just click and drag, now notice what I'm doing here. See that? So I can even make it go like that way, right? So it's kind of a neat thing. And then since this is live and active, I can then bring that up. I can bring this down, manipulate this, come back over to here, and even have control over what I can delete as well. So I can go over here to this little eraser option, and I can choose that and say, hey, listen, I don't want that as part of this, so I can control how much of that wave is going to go. And I can also come back and just be a little more specific using this guy here with my brush. So it's a combination of the last thing we did, but I'm actually using the gradient to do this, but then I'm adding it in here to this if I like. And again, let me just see if I can remove that. Okay, pretty cool. So it's really all about control over how you're working with these things here. So I'll come back to this and then manipulate this however I want. And then I can make some changes to it so you can really, really see it. And then maybe come over to here, erase some of that. So wow, not bad. So really neat stuff. This is all about all the control you want. I mean, some of you, once you learn about working with Camera Raw, and you can see all of the different sort of elements and sub-elements in here, you really never go back because this is, again, a one-stop shop. I mean, this is really kind of amazing how they have everything in one place that you might want to work with. All right, now, Why might not you want to do this? I mean, for me, if I'm going to be working on my levels and curves and my black and white, and then I want my saturation, I might want to just have those on independent adjustment layers to be able to do that independently in the non-camera raw. So it's really up to you. You have that kind of control. This is like, hey, I'm just working on this canvas right here. And you can always come back to this anytime, whenever you like. So there's kind of pros and cons, or it's really up to your own personal style and comfort level. So let me just go ahead and say okay for right now. Imagine, okay, there I am. There's my new image. And because I put this into a smart object, notice here is my mask for my smart filter, so you can see before and after. So you'll see the great work that I've done. And even better, I can always come back and make some changes to it. Okay, again, because we are working with a smart object. All right, and this takes me right back automatically to my editing tools. All right, so again, we were here, and then you'll see radial filter is going to be very similar to our graduated filter, but instead of going in a straight line, it's going to go in a circle, in a concentric circle. All right, here's the red eye removal tool if you want to work with that. The presets we already worked with. And then you can go ahead and just check out some of these things as well. Reset to the default. You can create a preset based off of what you already have selected here. Maybe you're already saving some settings. You want to load settings from other systems. All right, so lots and lots of control here. So really experiment with this. Okay, this is really kind of beyond, spice to taste, because like you have this whole cook's kitchen of all the things that you can do with this. That is, again, sort of a one-stop shop for all of your creative color management, all these different things in terms of lighting, different effects, and different ways to actually apply your effects, right? So the other thing I want to say, this will be the last thing I'm going to tell you, is I can, of course, work again with my mask, all right? So this is here to say, hey, listen, remember what masks do. It's either going to be a blindfold or it's going to be a mask. Which one do I want it to be, right? So some things I really don't want it to have the thing or whatever it is. So I overdid it a little bit on this part here. So maybe I just want to let that shine through a bit. And I don't want to have to go back into camera raw. So what I can do is simply click on this, and you guessed it, it's either going to be black or white. So I'm going to poke a hole to make my blindfold into a mask by simply going over to my brush tool, just hit the B key. And then notice, here's my black and white. If they're not already like that, you can just hit the D key. And you can also switch them around, just hitting the X key. A little review for you. And then you just want to check the size of your brush. And you also want to look at your opacity, just depending on how hard you want that to come in, how dark you want it to be. And then also you can play around with the hardness of your brush just the same. So I'm just going to keep it at this, see what that does. And then can I bring in some of that? Yep, there's the original building. There's no blue sky on the building. Okay, so you can see I can come right in there and just remove that. Cool. And then all is well with that. And maybe I want to bring that tree back, and maybe I want to really, really zoom in and maybe make my brush a tiny bit smaller. And I can just really come in and have some control over what I'm going to show. See that? And of course I would zoom in. I would kind of get rid of some of those little white spots and take care of it accordingly. But you can see what I'm doing here. Again, the power of masks on almost every advanced level here we can work with. All right, that looks a little bit junky, but you know what to do. I would just switch that back to, guess what? White, just by hitting the X key, and then bring that back. No big deal. Okay, non-destructive. Awesome. Okay, so pause the video, practice this. Find a photo that you love, or that you want to improve upon, anything. And really see what you can do to make it look this much better using the Camera Raw filter. All right, enjoy, and we'll see you soon. Okay, so who is ready for some action? In this lesson, we're going to talk about actions. All right, so if you don't have actions, let's see how we can open them up. Click over here to Window, go over here to our Actions panel, and we will see a whole bunch of stuff pop up here. What is this that we're seeing here? This is essentially Photoshop offering to us a whole series of pre-recorded steps to finally execute something that we might want to do. Like, for example, Photoshop has recorded all of the steps for a vignette, for a wood frame, to cast a shadow, right? All kinds of other kind of interesting things here. So therefore, we can just save all of those steps and execute it. These have been pre-recorded, and then we can simply run them. Okay, so if we take a look at what are some of the things that have been saved and pre-recorded, we can open these up. We'll see, okay, for example, my cast shadow, which is, notice, is only going to be for type, or it's going to be good for type, that is, probably the best, but you can try it out for other ones for sure. Other ones that have to be for a layer, some of them you want to have a selection like the marquee, or working with a lasso tool, etc. And notice how we have these little triangles there to open it up to see what in fact those steps are that have been saved and what will be able to be executed. So if I click on, let's say, the cast shadow, open that up and like, oh wow, Photoshop has really saved a lot of steps for me to be able to execute. And you'll see there's even kind of little sub parameters within all of this. Okay, that's great. I can collapse that. Go over to here. Oh, it's going to fill it in gray. Okay, Gaussian blur. Oh, radius. Oh my God. So just think about all the things that it can save you. Now, this is what Photoshop has actually done for me. In a little bit, I'm going to run it and you're going to see one of these things in, you get it, action, right? And you're also going to see how we can record our own actions, because sometimes we're not going to use any of these, right? Don't care about those, but thanks anyway. So let's just see it in, wait for it, action. So I want to do like this kind of water reflection effect on this. Okay. So, and you can see again, what's inside of that. It's going to do a zillion different things here. Oh my God. Wow. I can never do all that. So, and nor do I have the time to do it. So notice here it says type here, right? You can see I have this, and then it's going to be really good for type. And also notice how I have this as a type layer. All right, so that's going to be a good candidate for me to work on. Make sure that your type layer is in fact selected. Click on my action, and then guess what I'm going to do? I'm just going to hit the play button, right? You've probably seen this before. Any of you who are still working with DVDs or maybe on your players of any sorts. Click on that and then watch the magic happen. How cool is that, right? So now you'll notice that there is now a new layer that it did a zillion different things for me. Okay, so this is actually separate from that. So if I wanted to do other things, if I wanted to bring down the opacity even more, I can do that. I wanted to stretch this out a little bit. So if I hold down the Control or Command key, notice I can do something like that and stretch that out, kind of make it a little more warped. Hit enter. Cool. So I still have control over it. Even though Photoshop kind of started me off with something, I can still do whatever I want to it. Okay, so pretty cool. They are independent of each other, right? So if I make this one go away, this does not get affected. So just understand that it's not like a drop shadow. It basically just copied the layer. Well, we can see exactly what it did, right? You can see, made a snapshot of it. Okay, did all these different things here, converted it, blah, 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 did all these things here. But the implication is that it did have to make it into its own separate layer. Okay, so really fantastic. Experiment with these, really pretty great. Now, let's say I want to come over to here, and I'm just going to do one other one. That's another preset, so we can see one that's not in text. And we're going to do this one that's just sepia toning. All right, and we're going to do it on this layer right here, because notice how it says layer. So we want to make sure we're doing it on the entire layer. And very simply, let me just execute. Let me run it. So go over to here to my play button, and ooh, very cool. I like that a lot. And you will see that not only that now, I'm able to see that I actually get an adjustment layer that I can play around with. Let me make this a little bit wider. Get very, very sneaky there, okay? And it's done a whole bunch of other things as well. Okay, you can see, there it is, and it's done hue saturation. It's like, wow, I don't even know what it did, but guess what? I can come back and I can edit it just by double clicking on this, going to my properties panel, and I can see, okay, cool. There's some interesting things there. I can play around with it if I want to, right? Maybe bring up the saturation a little bit, do all kinds of different things. But Photoshop has given me a starter on what I'd like to do. All right, so two very good examples to help you save a lot of time as you are making some pretty cool creative stuff. Okay, so let's see what we can do on our own. So I'm going to just do something on my own, like I'm just going to put maybe a stroke around this and maybe do like an inner shadow. Who knows, right? I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. But essentially, whatever I'm going to do right now, I'm going to have Photoshop record it as an action. So therefore, I can then apply it later on to something else. Okay, so how do I do that? You'll notice here is a nice little plus sign, right, for doing new stuff. So I click on that. And it's asking me, okay, what do you want to call this? And I'm just going to call this text, stroke, and then inner shadow. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then you can also set some function keys if you want to. If I want to do like Shift, Control F3, if I'm using that a lot, I can do that. I can also put a color on it. If I start using these a lot, I can actually make it kind of stand out a little bit. Maybe I'm grouping them together, you know, that type of thing. All right. So, and now notice this button here, it says record. So as soon as I hit record, it's going to be recording all my actions. Right? And then I'm going to stop the recording and it's going to basically just seal in its back pocket all the things that I just did. So then I can execute it and run it all over again. So watch this. I'm going to hit record and you'll notice how my little red button is there indented and it's waiting for me to do stuff. Okay, so here I am with Italy. All right, and then I'm going to go over here to my effects. I'll put a stroke around it. And then, okay, great. I can do that. Maybe I like that. Maybe I want to do it a little bit more subtle. Okay, it's starting to look a little bit like a Italian horror film. Okay, cool. I like that. And then certainly you play around with all these things, whatever you want to do. Maybe I'll do an inner shadow. Okay, maybe that's a little bit more than I want. Maybe I'm going to bring that down a little bit. Okay, a little more subtle. Bring that in a tiny bit. Okay, see it before and after. Yep, I like that. Give it some texture. And guess what? I want to use this for a whole bunch of other things just the same. All right, so again, just for the purpose of this exercise, I'm keeping it simple. You can make it as simple or as complex as you want. So now let's click OK. That's now in the back pocket right there. You can see it. So I have to tell it that I'm done. I click stop and we'll see. There it is, all the amazing things that Photoshop has done for me, saving it, saving me time, saving me stress. Amazing. So, and you can even see my keyboard shortcut. So seeing in action is very simple. We're just going to bring in some text. I'm just going to type out the word piazza. Oops, maybe haunted piazza. All right, so I'm going to keep this as is, right? Make it maybe a little bit different than this here. And I'm ready to go. I'm ready to execute. So how do I do that? I can click on this and I can click on the play button. And then again, remember my keyboard shortcut, Shift Control F3. Of course, yours might be different, but let's just see now because this layer is selected and I execute, let's watch it happen. Click on that. Okay, so that didn't go well, so I need to interrupt my thought here. So before I actually execute, right, now that I've typed out all my text, I need to make sure it is actually outside of this layer here, because if I execute now, it's going to take in this hue saturation, right, of what I did before. So let me just bring that up to the top. That's great. Now it's all ready to go. So where it actually ends up is, of course, up to you where your layers go. So, of course, always keep an eye on your layers. This is going to end up on top away from my adjustment layer because I do not want everything to be in black and white, of course, because I want it to look exactly like this. So now let's see it in, wait for it, action. All right, and again, I can then execute my keyboard shortcut if I want to, Shift Control F3. Yours might be different, totally up to you. But I'm going to just click on this little button and let's see it in action. Go. Nice. That took like a nanosecond to execute. Do that, and yours could be done in however capacity you want, whatever your creative imagination dictates for you. And maybe it's just the same thing you do over and over and over again 50 times a day. It doesn't even have to be creative. It's just something technical, but you keep having to do that, like resizing things. Could be as simple as drop shadows, whatever it is, give it a shot, record yourself doing it, save it, and then execute over and over and over again. All right. We'll see you in the next lesson. Please go ahead and pause the video and practice this, and love to see some of your comments to see how you're using actions. Thank you for watching, everyone. This concludes our advanced Photoshop class. Hope you enjoyed it. I definitely had a blast teaching it. We covered a lot in this class. We discussed layer comps, blend modes, a ton of filters, gradient masks, camera raw, how to create 3D text, how to work with Photoshop actions, and so much more. And remember, you have the exercise files to practice on, and of course, please come back and watch this video as many times as you like. And please check out our other videos on additional Adobe programs, MS Office, and a lot more. Thank you again, and keep on learning.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget we also offer live classes in Office applications, professional development, and private training. Visit learnit.com for more details. Please remember to like and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for choosing Learnit.